Just 2 days after the awakening ceremony, Aldrin was thrown out of his own home. His younger brother Sorvin had awakened as a legendary sword god, while Aldrin received the lowly class of farmer, branded a complete failure by his family. Sorvin had always resented Aldrin for being the elder heir, so when this chance came, he mocked his brother and launched a lethal magical attack to finish him off. Aldrin barely dodged the lethal strike and fled deep into the Pakel woods to survive. Deep in the forest, Aldrin squeezed between two giant boulders to set up camp. Bleeding heavily with 0 rations, kept alive only by his poison-resistant skill. Forced to forage, he chewed bitter weeds, insects, and bits of rotten meat scattered on the dirt, enduring a brutal existence. But his hatred for his father and brother fueled his resolve to survive and seek vengeance, until a massive orc crossed his path a few days later. A fully grown orc would terrorize any normal traveler. Yet, to the starving young man, it looked like a massive feast. Armed with a crude stone axe, he used the dense trees to outmaneuver the beast. As soon as the monster swung its blade deep into a trunk, Aldrin lunged forward and slammed his axe into its exposed back. The giant creature collapsed to the dirt, leaving the young man stunned by his own lethal strength. Staring down at the fallen beast, Aldrin could hardly believe his crude weapon had brought it down. The monster still drew breath, helpless to move, so he crushed its neck with one final blow. Raw power surged through his arms, proving he was already far stronger than any normal human. Hauling the massive carcass back to camp like a light sack, he butchered the meat and devoured his first full meal in weeks. This explosive growth stemmed from his heavenly blessing, elevating his raw strength beyond that of his father, who was a veteran swordsman. For a full month, he trained in the wilderness, sharpening his instincts and honing his body. With the meat supply depleted, Aldrin decided the time had come to step out of the forest. His goal was clear: enter the city, register as an adventurer, and eventually hunt down his father and his treacherous brother Sorvin, the newly crowned sword god. Before setting off, he washed away a month of grime in a mountain spring and tailored new clothes out of tough orc hide. Days later, the sprawling gates of Varnhold loomed before him. Running dangerously low on coin, Aldrin pulled out a pocket watch and silver trinket he had taken from his family estate. He brought the items to Gold Basin, the grandest shop in town, but the clerks treated him like scum. Judging him by his ragged appearance, the guards tossed him out onto the street. Clenching his fists in anger, Aldrin headed into the city's underbelly to find a black market buyer, unaware that a hooded figure was trailing him through the crowd. Without warning, the thief threw a blinding powder into his eyes and snatched his coin pouch. Reflexes forged in the wilderness kicked in, and the young man sprinted through the crowded market after the thief. Enhanced by his month of survival training, he closed the gap instantly and cornered the thief in a narrow alley. Unmasking the culprit revealed a young girl trembling in terror, though Aldrin kept his expression stern and cold. Grabbing her shoulder, he dragged her deeper into the shadows to demand answers. Aldrin pressed the red-haired thief against the alley wall, demanding to know why she targeted him. Shaking uncontrollably, she confessed she was an orphan, stealing simply to buy food. She led him through back alleys to her hideout, introducing her partner Doric. Doric was a young boy trying to intimidate him with a rusted sword, though Aldrin saw right through his clumsy stance. Rather than striking them down, Aldrin ordered the duo to act as his guides through the city. The young thieves navigated the back alleys and guided him to a quiet pawn shop run by a kindly old man. Reaching into his cloak, Aldrin produced several jeweled heirlooms taken from his family home. The old shopkeeper inspected a sapphire necklace and offered 3 gold coins on the spot. A life-changing fortune for a runaway. Selling the jewels, Aldrin chose to keep his father's pocket watch. Before leaving the counter, his eyes caught a weathered tome detailing the legend of a man named Nissen. Though the price tag was steep, the merchant noticed the young man's keen interest in the book. Shrugging with a gentle smile, the shopkeeper handed over the ancient volume without taking a copper, instructing him to settle the tab whenever his fortune grew. Pause right there. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more hidden manga gems. Drop a comment saying loving this down below. I bet most of you won't do it. Now, back to the story. Flush with coin and carrying a new book to read, Aldrin felt his dark mood lift completely. Feeling generous, he offered to buy the 2 young thieves a feast at a local spot. Aldrin invited Doric and his partner to join him for a hot meal. Despite their earlier ambush, he welcomed their company after spending a lonely month surrounded by monsters. Sitting inside a humble eatery, Aldrin devoured the hot, seasoned dish with overwhelming satisfaction. As they ate, he shared tales of his brutal survival in the Packle Woods, leaving both kids speechless. When Aldrin casually mentioned his poison resistance, Doric and the girl nearly choked on their food. They realized his body didn't just resist venom. He was likely immune to lethal toxins. Doric recalled throwing a paralyzing pellet directly at Aldrin earlier, which should have frozen any man solid. Yet Aldrin had brushed it off completely. That revelation proved to Aldrin that his supposed trash skill was a rare divine gift. Bidding the kids farewell, Aldrin secured a room at a cheap inn called Long Rest, ready to rest despite its creaky floorboards and run-down walls. For a man used to sleeping on jagged rocks, a real bed felt luxurious. Aldrin paid for a full week up front and retreated to his room. Sleep didn't come, so he opened a volume detailing the work of Nissen, a legendary botanist. The pages described lethal flora so venomous that scholars couldn't study them. An idea struck Aldrin instantly. Immune to all poisons, Aldrin could consume these rare plants without risk and build immense power. This was his path to getting vengeance on his family and Sorvin, the sword god who shattered his existence. The young man read through the night, a newfound focus burning in his chest. At daybreak, Aldrin walked straight to the Adventurer Guild Hall. Handing over a single silver coin, he registered and received his official identification card. The receptionist noted that he would begin as a novice and advance by completing contracts. Choosing to work alone, kept extra coin in his pouch and hid his strange abilities. Standing at the notice board, he searched for a job to launch his journey. Starting at the bottom rank, the novice warrior scanned the available bounties. The clerk assigned him a basic task: hunt the goblins plaguing the old trade road. Collecting their left ears would prove the kills and earn him a handful of silver. Equipped with a simple leather shield and a weathered sword, Aldrin set off. Spotting a goblin lurking in the tall grass, he struck, felling the creature in a single motion. Power surged through his limbs, far beyond the strength of ordinary men. Recalling the toxic plants he ate in Packle Woods, Aldrin realized they had permanently altered his body. 2 months passed. Aldrin shared quarters with Nesca and Doric, a pair of reformed thieves, who had turned to adventuring to clear their names. Having built a steady purse of gold, Aldrin earned his promotion to bronze rank. Rank mattered little. His true aim remained retribution against Sorvin, the god of swords. Preparing his next strategy, Aldrin visited the central cathedral for an appraisal. Paying a full gold coin, a grand priest activated a glowing status crystal above Aldrin's head. Though registered under the humble class of farmer, his numerical attributes showed massive bonus multipliers. The crystal confirmed it. Those poisonous herbs had genuinely enhanced his physical baseline. Furthermore, the appraisal displayed a rare passive trait, granting complete immunity to all toxins. Intent on growing exponentially stronger, Aldrin prepared to return to the treacherous Packle Woods. Bidding farewell to Nesca, the warrior made his way back toward his former cave shelter. Re-establishing his camp, he immediately searched the brush for deadly plants to test his limits. Reviewing the new quest listings, Aldrin picked a contract to hunt juvenile rock lizards. Swift and armored, these beasts offered an ideal benchmark for his upgraded combat abilities. Completing the registration details, he marched toward the jagged hills bordering the city walls. Arriving at the rocky slope, he quickly spotted a scaly reptile basking on a stone. Standard bronze adventurers struggled against their blinding speed, but Aldrin tracked the creature's darting motion without straining his eyes. As the lizard lunged forward, no fear touched his mind. Pivoting cleanly off his back foot, Aldrin sidestepped the strike and brought down his blade, shattering the beast instantly. The physiological gains from the wild plants had taken hold. The frail farmer was gone. Hours passed as he cleared the hills, and with every fallen beast, his posture grew steadier. Every slash was precise, tactical, and economical. If a handful of poisonous herbs could grant this power, then continuing his toxic diet was undeniably the correct path. As dusk approached, Aldrin bagged enough monster scales to fulfill the guild contract. Returning to the hall, he surrendered the proof and received a heavy pouch of coins. The payout far exceeded goblin bounties, while requiring half the exertion. At the inn, Doric and Nesca were already sitting by the hearth. Caked in mud and sporting fresh bruises, the pair looked battered from an intense day in the field. Doric looked up, offering a quiet, weary nod instead of his usual coarse banter. Aldrin's stern words from the previous evening had clearly driven them to push their limits. Offering brief greetings, Aldrin sat down and resumed sorting his gathered botanical specimens. To match Sorvin's terrifying power, every waking hour demanded disciplined preparation. This victory was merely a baseline. He required rarer toxins and far higher attributes. Suppressing his gag reflex, Aldrin swallowed another dose of bitter, caustic roots. His mind remained locked on reaching absolute physical perfection. Settling into his routine as an adventurer, Aldrin stood before the mission board searching for work. The receptionist explained that certain contracts targeted stationary boss monsters, while others required gathering rare regional materials, prompting Aldrin to select the hedgerow slime hunt in Mystria. The job paid 4 silver coins, a massive upgrade from hunting low-tier goblins. The payout felt bittersweet, proving how weak his natural talent truly was. Poisonous flora remained his sole shortcut to true power, pushing him to keep experimenting until he identified the specific weeds that directly raised his attributes. Returning to the inn, he found Doric and Nesca waiting in the common room. Doric nursed a crippled knee, while Nesca aimed to master magic. Both had trained relentlessly, finally gaining the skill to slaughter goblins effortlessly. Eager to advance, they asked Aldrin to form an official party alongside them. Aldrin accepted, though he insisted on observing their battle rhythm first. At dawn, the trio set off toward the forest. Doric's ruined joint made his pace agonizingly sluggish, so Aldrin refused to drag out the march and hoisted Doric straight onto his back. Despite carrying a full-grown man, Aldrin barely felt the weight as he trekked forward. Spotting their target, the pair, Doric and Nesca executed their strategy, using Nesca as live bait to draw the monster straight into Doric's strike zone. Unable to move quickly, Doric allowed the creature to charge directly into his blade, crushing it in one blow. The technique lacked flair, but proved effective. Satisfied with their coordination, Aldrin welcomed them aboard and celebrated by ordering a lavish spread of prime meat and rice. Over dinner, conversation shifted to their ultimate ambitions. Doric craved fine meals, while Nesca sought funds for Mage Academy tuition. Asked about his own goals, Aldrin revealed the cold truth. He fought for vengeance, unspooling his dark history. Born into a prestigious martial lineage, his lack of high-tier combat talent earned him ruthless contempt from his father and younger brother, Sorvin. A prodigy branded a sword god, Sorvin had nearly murdered Aldrin before banishing him from the family estate. Left for dead, Aldrin endured years of solitary survival in the wilderness. Though stunned by Sorvin's terrifying power, his companions understood his fury. Turning to his pouch, Aldrin cleared up the mystery behind his pouch of dried herbs. He had no interest in poisoning enemies or trading illegal narcotics. Instead, he laid out his secret. Possessing complete poison immunity, he ingested lethal toxins to force attribute growth, using lethal venom as a brutal physical training tool. Though the process tasted vile and wrecked his body, it remained the sole path for a talentless farmer to narrow the gap against a natural monster like Sorvin. Laying out his revenge plan, Aldrin acknowledged Sorvin's status as a once-in-a-century sword god, destined to become an untouchable hero. Aldrin intended to crush his brother at the very peak of his fame, ensuring the retribution cut as deep as possible. Inspired, Doric pledged to rise as a top adventurer despite his bad leg, aiming to surpass Sorvin himself. Meanwhile, Nesca, the former thief-turned-aspiring mage, pledged her magic to back their cause. With their party formed to slay a future hero, Aldrin instructed his teammates to train independently. Busy with plant research, he vowed to mend Doric's leg and secure magic tuition for Nesca. He dispatched Nesca to scout information on a specific monster, then escorted Doric to the healing guild at sunrise. There, a senior healer inspected Doric's knee, finding torn ligaments and severe joint degradation stemming from a 7-year-old fall. Treatment was possible, but required 20 platinum coins plus rare metal slime oil, a sum far beyond a year's earnings. Doric slumped in despair, seeing his career end, until the healer quietly whispered a lead about a disgraced doctor named Cedric, who operated outside guild rules. Gathering rumors across town, Doric discovered Cedric's backstory. Once the guild's chief physician, his exorbitant fees caused his disgrace, driving him from the upper ranks. Now residing in the capital's slums, Cedric treated impoverished patients for meager coins. While Doric saw an obstacle, Aldrin spotted an opportunity. Desperate for income, Cedric would perform the surgery cheap. Aldrin planned to send Doric and Nesca to the capital as a pair. Since Doric lacked diplomatic skill and Sorvin might lurk in the capital, Sharp-witted Nesca was essential to negotiate terms safely. Settling their strategy, Aldrin returned to his room, ingested another dosage of toxicity, and visited the local chapel for his routine stat evaluation. Standing before the altar, Aldrin watched his endurance and stamina values tick upward on the status display. This growth confirmed his theory. Consuming toxic flora directly forced his physical limits higher. Out of his 3 test samples, at least 2 delivered measurable attribute gains. Planning one final assessment before returning to the wilds, Aldrin prepared for his next move, looking out for Nesca and Doric. Doric was simple-minded and still recovering from his earlier trauma, while Nesca handled the practical side. Aldrin handed over travel funds for their journey straight to the capital. They needed to locate Cedric, a fallen expert, who offered the sole path to Doric's recovery. Nesca swore to manage the talks, leaving Aldrin relieved that she took the lead. Once the pair departed, Aldrin ventured into the Pakel Woods for another month of training, pitching his usual shelter in a hidden crevice between 2 boulders before starting. 2 herbs drew his focus, a purple bloom named Risengrass that raised endurance, and a red speckled fungus called Genpel mushroom for stamina. Bypassing the vile flavor, thin, rice paper wrapped each dose to let him gulp them whole. Finding a third plant, capable of boosting raw physical power, remained his next priority. 5 days in, terror struck the campsite. A towering, bear-like beast, far deadlier than any creature Aldrin had faced before, crashed through the trees. Though Aldrin scrambled up a trunk, the monster caught his scent. Trapped without an escape route, the young man struck first, leaping down to drive his blade deep into the hide. Yet, the thick armor minimized the damage. When jaws snapped near his face, Aldrin forced a clump of toxic resin, grass down the brute's throat. Thrashing in violent panic, the beast fled into the brush, leaving Aldrin battered and gasping. Broken steel lay beside him, every muscle throbbing with sharp agony, forcing him to gather his gear and retreat toward the city walls. Before long, Aldrin resolved to send Nesca and Doric off to the capital as a team, knowing Doric lacked words and Sorvin might be lurking near the royal court. Sharp and steady, Nesca had to lead the talks while steering the trip. Settling the arrangement, Aldrin returned to his room, swallowed toxic herbs to test his resistance, and walked toward the cathedral where the priest conducted his routine stat assessment. Kneeling before the altar, he watched his endurance and stamina metrics tick upward, confirming that consuming lethal flora was indeed fortifying his body. 2 of his 3 experimental herbs were yielding clear results. One final inventory check preceded his return to the wilderness. Prior to departing, Aldrin ensured his companions, Nesca and Doric, were prepared. Doric remained naive while healing from earlier trauma, and Nesca possessed the minds to guide them. Providing ample coin, Aldrin dispatched the pair capital-bound. Their objective was Cedric, an outcast specialist holding the key to Doric's cure. Nesca guaranteed she would drive the bargain, easing Aldrin's mind. Left alone, the fighter re-entered the Pakel Woods for 30 days of isolation. Returning to the rocky nook between twin boulders, he established camp and began training. His regimen centered on purple raisin grass to build endurance, alongside spotted red Genpel mushrooms to expand stamina reserves. Encasing the bitter herbs in rice paper allowed effortless swallowing. Next, he sought a specimen capable of elevating raw strength. 5 days into the run, danger breached his camp. A colossal bear beast, dwarfing any opponent in Aldrin's past, charged from the tree line. Ascending a thick branch offered no safety as nostrils tracked his position, forcing the realization that flight was impossible. Prompting an immediate preemptive blow. Dropping from above, his blade bit hard into flesh though. Dense bone prevented a fatal wound. Snapping jaws met a fistful of lethal raisin grass rammed straight down the gullet, poison burning its insides. The creature reeled back and bolted into darkness. Exhausted, bleeding, and aching in every joint, Aldrin stood alive. His weapon shattered into splinters, compelling a weary retreat toward urban shelter. Shock dissolved into cold fury along the dirt path. That beast earned second rank on his kill list, slotted right beneath Sorvin, the man who had betrayed him. Vows were made to return with enough power to slay the brute permanently. Stumbling into the city inn, his appearance drew stares. Shredded cloth hung from his shoulders, caked in dried blood and dark contusions. Nesca and Doric gasped at the sight of his ragged frame. After describing the monstrous bear, he affirmed that his wilderness training would continue unabated. Distributing roasted meat skewers purchased along the road eased the lingering tension, letting the three unwind together in relief that all remained alive. Aldrin gathered Doric and Nesca to iron out their next move. Deep in the city's black market, they located a doctor named Cedric, capable of mending Doric's ruined leg. Bargaining fiercely, the group talked Cedric down from 15 platinum coins to 5, turning a pipe dream into a reachable goal, before Aldrin thanked Nesca for showing him how to choke down his stat-boosting herbs. Come morning, Aldrin headed out alone to hunt a stray cowbird. Hybrid beasts with avian features and bovine bodies, these monsters were famous for prime meat. Rather than joining the crowd on the open plains, Aldrin targeted a desolate rocky pass. Spotting a cowbird grazing in the crags, he crept up quietly from behind. A quick strike to the legs immobilized the beast, before a heavy hammer blow finished it off. Careful butchering on the spot preserved every cut of top-grade meat. Carrying the entire carcass back to town left the local butcher wide-eyed. Where other hunters brought scraps, Aldrin delivered an intact creature. Impressed by the pristine quality, the shopkeeper handed over 5 gold coins, far exceeding standard quest pay. Throughout the following month, Aldrin spent his days hunting down cowbirds. Though tracking proved difficult on slow days, his coin pouch eventually grew to 30 gold. Faced with the choice between funding Doric's surgery or buying a grimoire for Nesca, he prioritized the spellbook. Equipping Nesca with magic would unlock higher-tier quests and boost their overall earning power fast. Returning to a familiar shopkeeper, Aldrin traded 20 gold coins for the grimoire. Investing early in his party's capabilities felt like the right strategy. His ultimate goal was matching Sorvin, his brother and rival, who was already assembling elite allies in the capital. Back at their lodgings, Aldrin found Doric swinging his sword while Nesca studied her notes. Aldrin set the magical grimoire down before his 2 companions. Nesca, who had been diligently learning to read and write, lit up at the sight. Doric, ever the frontline brawler, watched with cautious curiosity. Opening the cover, Nesca could barely contain her excitement. Guilt had weighed on her for relying on the others, but Aldrin cut her off, urging her to focus purely on growth so they could take on bigger challenges. Doric winced silently, anxious that magic users would render his physical strength useless, but Aldrin reassured him immediately, promising they would sharpen his martial skills together. They tested a basic entry exercise from the grimoire to sense internal mana, though. Aldrin felt nothing besides sudden drowsiness, while Nesca adapted instantly. A strange mist materialized around her fingertips, revealing an incredible natural affinity for the arcane. And Aldrin smiled at her rapid breakthrough before heading into town alone the following morning. Even registered officially as a mere farmer, his stats surged continuously, thanks to consuming rare stat-boosting plants. Stopping by the church to evaluate his growth, he blinked at the massive numerical jump on his status sheet. Next came a long overdue visit to the armory for new equipment. Ditching his dull starter blade and rusted armor pieces, Aldrin spent gold on a fine steel sword and fitted leather gear to withstand tough battles. Pinpointing the exact herb responsible for his strength gains made the endless grind feel entirely worth it. Later that afternoon, the party gathered in the open fields beyond the city walls to train. Aldrin began drilling Doric on sword stance and footwork. Blessed with the Holy Knight class, Doric absorbed proper technique instantly, while Nesca focused nearby on fire manipulation. Within 30 minutes, a miniature flame sparked atop Nesca's finger. Unsatisfied with simple sparks, she asked Aldrin to help her tackle a full fireball spell, as incantations spilled from her lips, gathering swirling heat between her palms, and signaling the rise of a formidable mage far ahead of schedule. Watching both teammates advance at breakneck speed, Aldrin refused to drag the group down, so he put every ounce of effort into his own sword work over 2 intense weeks. Nesca mastered foundational elemental spells and began refining high-speed incantations. Doric's strikes grew sharper and far more authoritative. Meanwhile, Aldrin identified a speckled purple fruit that consistently boosted his strength stat. Running low on supplies forced him to plan a trip back into the bear-infested forest. Before setting out, Aldrin urged Doric and Nesca to officially evaluate their stats at the church. Though hesitant over the steep gold coin evaluation fee, they agreed when Aldrin covered the cost. The church crystal confirmed Doric as a holy knight, boasting exceptional endurance, even with his lingering leg injury capping his true potential. Nesca registered as a magician with staggering magic output and the rare mana surge skill. Aldrin's panel displayed anomalous stats, reflecting the immense power gained from toxic flora. To test their skills, the team took on a bronze rank quest hunting loud frogs, giant beasts that crushed prey by leaping. They required Aldrin's careful oversight. When the frogs lunged, Nesca sliced through them with sharp gusts of wind magic. Doric stepped up next, felling another monster with a single clean sword strike. Bagging 30 frogs brought in a mountain of coin and gave Doric a massive boost in confidence. Aldrin praised their hard work, though he cautioned Doric about the long road ahead to match his experience. Weeks of ruthless training proved that Doric and Nesca were growing into capable warriors. While Doric tended to overthink his moves, Nesca stayed dead serious, wanting more field work before ranking up. Seeing their progress, Aldrin sent the pair out to tackle missions on their own. Together, they aimed to save 5 platinum coins to heal Doric's leg and reach the top ranks. 2 months flew by, earning the duo a reputation in the guild for a flawless contract record. Off on his own, Aldrin hunted specific beasts, earning the odd title Cowbird Hunter, and gathered rare herbs deep in the forest. Stepping back into town after a long hunt, Aldrin met Doric and Nesca, who were bursting with news. The pair had finally collected every last coin required for the surgery. Tears welled in their eyes as they thanked Aldrin for dragging them out of the gutter and making them real adventurers. Hiding his pride behind a cool posture, Aldrin told them to save their gratitude and focus on getting stronger. Before leaving for the capital, Aldrin noted they needed extra travel funds and a rare jar of metal slime oil for the procedure. The journey also carried a personal objective for Aldrin: tracking down his brother, Sorvin. Doric brought up rumors of a prodigy at the Royal Academy, and Aldrin knew instantly it was Sorvin. Though the kingdom backed Sorvin with all its power, Doric and Nesca vowed to stand beside Aldrin to the end. On their final evening in town, Aldrin brought the pair out to shop for gear. Spotting their foul, tattered packs, Aldrin bought them sturdy new travel bags. Though a simple gesture, the practical gift brought genuine smiles to Doric and Nesca. At dawn, the party chose to walk the long road to the capital rather than pay for a sluggish carriage. Striking out on the open highway, the 3 companions moved like a true unit, ready for whatever lay ahead. The road to the capital stretched long, carrying Aldrin away from a noble past he had lost. Born with a farmer's blessing instead of a warrior's gift, Aldrin had watched his family turn their backs on him. Cast out by his own blood, Aldrin walked alongside his companions as they traded stories of where they came from. Years spent swinging a blade every waking hour had left Aldrin without friends, romance, or a normal life. Hearing his story, Doric spoke of surviving the slums under a brutal stepfather, before Nesca shared her past, a childhood trapped in a dark orphanage that sold its young wards for gold. Fate brought the two together when Nesca nursed a bleeding, broken Doric back to life. Turning to thievery to stay alive, the pair scraped together coins to buy Nesca her first spell book. Unpacking these painful memories wove a deep bond between the 3 companions, and for the first time, Aldrin felt the cold guard around his heart begin to thaw. Passing through the towering gates of the capital, the group headed straight into the shadowy black market. Filthy alleyways teemed with black market stalls and cages filled with enslaved captives. Their destination was the clinic of Sadric, a greedy back-alley physician with unmatched surgical skill. Only Sadric possessed the skill required to repair Doric's shattered leg and restore his full strength. Masking his greed behind a slick smile, Sadric dropped the act the moment money touched the table. Sensing danger, Aldrin cut in and took control of the negotiations. Aldrin made it clear that Sadric would receive payment in installments, withholding the remaining balance until the leg fully healed. Sadric flared up in anger, but desperate for coin, the corrupt doctor bowed to Aldrin's strict terms. With the contract settled, Sadric agreed to begin the procedure the following morning. Leaving the alleyways behind, Aldrin searched for secure lodgings to guard their heavy purse. Raised in poverty, Doric and Nesca pointed toward cheap, decrepit inns, but Aldrin walked past them and chose the Pharaoh, a spotless, high-end hotel. Bowing staff made the former thieves feel out of place, even with a price tag of 1 gold coin per night. Unbothered by the steep price, Aldrin booked 3 nights so Doric could rest before the surgery. High above the city streets, the room offered plush mattresses and a magical temperature regulator. While Aldrin washed off the road dust, Doric and Nesca gazed out the window, reflecting on their journey. They remembered how desperate they had been when they first tried to rob Aldrin in the wood. Looking back, the pair realized Aldrin had pulled them straight out of a hopeless existence. Sitting together, Doric and Nesca swore a quiet oath to follow Aldrin wherever he led. At daybreak, the trio returned to the clinic, where Sadric prepared his instruments. Sadric put Doric under with heavy sedatives and spent 8 grueling hours repairing his knee. When Doric finally woke with a clean fix, Aldrin managed the final payout with sharp precision. Handing Sadric 3 platinum coins as a deposit, Aldrin kept the remaining 2 coins tucked safely in his pouch. Aldrin informed the doctor that the rest would be paid only after the stitches came out, and Doric walked smoothly. That ensured the greedy surgeon would stay attentive during recovery. When Doric regained consciousness, his leg was completely dead to the touch, though the physician guaranteed he would walk again with enough rest. Aldrin hauled Doric back to the inn on his shoulders. Late that night, with Doric asleep, Aldrin and Nesca slipped out to hunt for news about Sorvin. Nesca led the way into a seedy tavern, knowing precisely how underworld channels operated. She flashed a subtle hand sign to the barkeep to secure an informant. Moments later, the pair stepped into a secluded back room for their meeting. Waiting inside sat a heavily tattooed man with a shaved head. The broker's age was hard to pin down. Somewhere between 20 and 40. Aldrin pressed him straight away for every detail on Sorvin. The informant revealed that Sorvin had risen to massive fame. Crowned as the sword god, his brother stood as top student at the National Academy, surpassing even prodigy sages and necromancers. Sorvin ranked as the indisputable strongest. Right now, he led 7 elite peers into a high-tier dungeon, though dark rumors lingered. According to underground whispers, Sorvin had allied with syndicate bosses in the capital. Evidently, the sword god was using criminal networks to hunt someone down. Aldrin realized his brother was still tracking him after 6 full months. Sensing immediate danger, Aldrin prepared to flee the capital at dawn. Next morning, Aldrin shared one last lavish breakfast with Nesca and Doric. Doric sat comfortably at the table, his leg mending steadily from surgery. Over warm pancakes and honey, Aldrin announced his departure for Varnhold that evening. Staying together meant exposing his companions to Sorvin's vengeful wrath. Once darkness fell, Aldrin struck out down the highway alone. 2 hours into the trek, a figure sprang from the shadow and pressed cold steel to his throat. The masked assailant demanded to know why Aldrin was asking around about Sorvin. Keeping his composure, Aldrin insisted he was merely a brother concerned for his family. A truth-detecting spell flared, confirming the answer and forcing the blade back. Spotting a peculiar ring and a distinct scar across the stranger's hand, Aldrin recognized the attacker as the disguised watcher from the city square. Suddenly, the assailant's features melted like wax, revealing a striking woman with long black hair. Her name was Celine, a prodigy sage from Sorvin's academy. Celine burst into mocking laughter upon learning Sorvin's target was a plain farmer, explaining she had tracked Aldrin to curry favor with the sword god. Rather than panicking, Aldrin offered to draft a recommendation note endorsing her for Sorvin's party. Delighted by the offer, Celine praised his unexpected generosity despite her violent threat. Aldrin played her expertly, outsmarting a girl who held the title of High Sage. Despite her tremendous magical prowess, Celine remained naive enough to swallow his flattery. Aldrin wrote a letter for her to give to Sorvin, the man currently hunting him. On the surface, the message appeared entirely warm and harmless. Yet Aldrin had laced every line to spark deadly paranoia between Sorvin and Celine. Celine strutted off grinning, completely oblivious to the trap she carried. Knowing time was running out, Aldrin sprinted back to the safety of Varnhold. Rejoining Doric and Nesca at their hideout, he made quick preparations. Doric's leg was fully healed, leaving the warrior eager to take on fresh contracts. Aldrin broke the news that they needed to pack up before Sorvin tracked them down. Having little affection for the city anyway, Doric and Nesca eagerly agreed to relocate and forge a proper adventuring team. They chose Osterhall as their base, a quiet township near the metropolis of Norvane, where Aldrin spent 3 grueling weeks preparing. Aldrin secured silver rank status and ventured deep into Pakel Woods, harvesting rare herbs. Along the way, he carefully steered clear of a terrifying apex bear. Returning home, Aldrin found Doric sprinting around without a hint of his former limp. 3 days before their planned departure, a sharp knock rattled their front door. Fearing Sorvin's assassins had finally found them, Aldrin drew his blade. Aldrin vaulted out the window, circled around the alleyway, and slipped directly behind the unexpected visitor, with his weapon poised to strike. Lowering his guard in shock, Aldrin realized he had completely misjudged the situation. Standing on the doorstep was simply the elderly merchant from Sevenluck. The old shopkeeper had aided Aldrin countless times, even bestowing the life-changing grimoire. Far from an enemy, the old man had brought Nesca a top-tier magic staff as a parting gift. Though Aldrin apologized profusely for his extreme paranoia, the merchant merely chuckled. Bidding farewell left Aldrin driven to succeed, determined to repay the old man's generosity. Packing their gear, Aldrin, Doric, and Nesca stepped out of the Long Rest Hotel and hit the road. Though cramped and foul-smelling, the room had launched their journey, making departure bittersweet for Aldrin. So, rather than dwell on it, he hurried the group along to avoid spending the night exposed on the open highway. Stopping by the local church, Aldrin offered a final farewell to the priest. A grave warning followed. A high cardinal from the capital was hunting an adventurer named Aldrin, clearly sent by Sorvin using holy influence. The priest urged Aldrin to bypass the capital entirely and lay low in distant cities. Leaving the city gates behind, the trio quickly fell into a comfortable rhythm. Hold on a second. Smash that like button and subscribe right now. If you want more hidden manga gems, I challenge you to drop a comment below. Type, "I'm loving it." Though I bet most of you won't actually do it. Alright, let's jump right back into the story. Under cover of darkness at camp, Neska slipped away to hone her spellcasting in private. Merging wind and water elements, Neska strove to master a spell called Icicle Ball. Progress came slow, yet her resolve to stand as a reliable partner for Aldrin never wavered. Fortunately, her rare trait Deep Well allowed her to train for hours without exhaustion. While nearby, Doric also worked in secret. With his injured leg fully restored, Doric spent the late hours running drills and polishing his blade work. Visualizing his past sparring matches against Aldrin, Doric refined every strike. Both companions pushed themselves relentlessly, eager to prove useful when Aldrin sought his vengeance. Meanwhile, back in the capital, Celine, a girl possessing the rare Sage class, attempted to gain Sorvin's favor. Having encountered Aldrin earlier, Celine delivered a letter from him to Sorvin, believing it would win his trust. Yet Aldrin had crafted the message specifically to sabotage both of them. Reading the contents sent Sorvin into a furious outburst. Sorvin hurled insults at Celine and threw her out of his quarters. He vowed to end her life if she ever crossed his sight again. Stunned, Celine realized Aldrin had manipulated her, destroying her standing with Sorvin instantly. Sorvin wielded the formidable Sword God class, a legendary title borne by only 3 figures in history. Those ancient champions were renowned for slaying colossal dragons and demon lords, meaning Sorvin now ranked among the most lethal and influential individuals on the continent. Legends still recall the first champion and his mythic blade, Vinditane, a weapon celebrated for wielding both holy and dark magic in tandem. Today, that legendary blade lies entombed within a cavern, guarded by beasts and toxic fumes. As a student, Sorvin now bore that exact same heroic title. When Celine tried to clear the misunderstanding, Sorvin drew his blade on her. Sorvin promised to strike Celine down if she ever mentioned his brother Aldrin again. Facing total rejection from the most powerful student in the academy, Celine cursed Aldrin for ruining her prospects and chose to abandon the city. Meanwhile, Aldrin, Doric, and Neska spent a week on the road before reaching the city of Osterhall. Though modest in size, Osterhall offered effortless navigation and relaxed gate security. Wandering the bustling streets, the party located an apothecary to restock on supplies. Eventually, they secured lodgings at an affordable inn named Treetop Tower. Clean accommodations and a hot bath made it a vast improvement over their previous haunts. Dawn saw them heading straight to the local adventurer guild to register for contract. Although Aldrin held silver rank status, he selected basic bronze quests to start. Aldrin wanted Doric and Neska to raise their ranks first so they could tackle high-level work together. Yet the local mercenary crowd in Osterhall proved hostile toward newcomers. The moment they crossed the threshold, a hulking veteran cut off Doric and sneered at him like a rookie. Arriving in the new settlement, Aldrin's party made an immediate line for the guild hall. Tension spiked as they crossed paths with Vorlan, the town's top platinum rank adventurer. Arrogant to the core, Vorlan attempted to treat Doric like an errand boy. Aldrin stepped between them instantly, making it clear his team would bow to no one. Vorlan grudgingly receded, though malice hung heavy across the hall. As Aldrin inspected the request board, one of Vorlan's henchmen lunged to grab his shoulder. Without hesitation, Aldrin slammed the attacker to the floor, igniting a full-scale tavern brawl. Heavily outnumbered, Aldrin, Doric, and Neska stood shoulder to shoulder and leveled the room. For causing the chaos, the guild handed Aldrin a 1-week suspension, a penalty he welcomed since Aldrin intended to spend those days gathering rare, power-enhancing herbs to increase his strength. Next morning, Aldrin visited an alchemy shop called the Wandering Cat to prepare for his journey into Kelvane. Inside, he met the proprietor, a young woman serving as the town's sole alchemist. Though eccentric and constantly misinterpreting his requests, her expertise proved beyond question. Aldrin bought cooling, healing potions from Tilda to soothe his wounds. More importantly, Aldrin shared his detailed notes on magical plants with her. Tilda confirmed that purple lazar fruit, which enhances physical strength, grows across Kelvane. Most people avoid the deadly fruit, but it was precisely what Aldrin needed. Armed with this knowledge, Aldrin prepped to enter the forest. Earlier, Aldrin had met Tilda, a chatty alchemist running a local shop. Tilda shared vital tips about Kelvane, warning him of spiked genpel leaves and deadly ognar fruit, also called the Apple of Death, A famous botanist claimed it unlocks massive hidden power. Tilda added rumors of a strange, monstrous bird lurking deep within the canopy. Though Aldrin found her endless chatter grating, the young fighter appreciated the intel and ventured into the woods. Unlike previous quiet zones, Kelvane swarmed with active adventurers and loggers. Scouting for rare herbs, Aldrin stumbled upon a cavern housing a goblin nest. Spotting a suitable temporary base, Aldrin moved in to eliminate the monsters. Striking fast, the warrior dropped guards and archers before they could group up. Two massive hobgoblins rallied a countercharge, but Aldrin outclassed them completely. Cutting down the commanders instantly sent the remaining goblins fleeing in terror. After clearing the cave, Aldrin fortified the entrance and made camp. Throughout the week, Aldrin focused entirely on harvesting toxic plants for stat gains. Lizar fruits grew plentifully, though rare items like genpel mushrooms proved hard to find. One afternoon, a heavy, frigid pressure settled over the damp air. Following the aura, Aldrin discovered a pitch-black tree sprouting directly from a dead goblin. The parasitic Ognar plant absorbed traits from whatever host corpse nourished it. Aldrin harvested a small fruit for analysis, proceeding with extreme caution. Touching the strange vegetation directly could prove instantly lethal. Completing his expedition, Aldrin secured a massive haul of poisonous flora. That included prickly, jimpy leaves Aldrin still had not figured out how to ingest safely. Returning to Osterhall, Aldrin went straight to his inn room to rest his aching muscles. Inside, Aldrin reunited with his team, finding Doric and Nesca relaxing. His companions assured Aldrin the city remained peaceful without any rival interference. Unpacking after a brutal week in the forest, Aldrin warned Doric and Nesca to keep back while he handled the toxic flora. Scrubbing the poisonous residue clean, the trio sat down to exchange news. Nesca proudly announced her official promotion to silver rank. Though still recovering from his wounds, Doric celebrated her achievement before Aldrin spoke up. Aldrin detailed meeting Tilda, an energetic alchemist crafting high-grade remedies. Aldrin explained that Kelvane proved far more dangerous than their previous hunting grounds. Monster density was high, and the poisonous plants reached terrifying potency levels. Aldrin highlighted the Ognar fruit, a specimen so toxic, proximity alone kills. Aldrin shared rumors suggesting the deadly fruit could bestow a brand new skill. The claim stunned Doric and Nesca, who believed skills came strictly from divine blessing. Aldrin produced a jimpy leaf, displaying its thick coating of razor-sharp spines. Consuming it promised stat gains, but chewing spines meant shredding his throat. Doric surprisingly suggested rolling and smoking the dried leaf, while Nesca argued brewing a refined potion offered a safer alternative. Aldrin decided to consult Tilda for professional alchemy assistance later. Next morning, Aldrin headed to the Adventurer Guild alone to spare his friends trouble. Predictably, the platinum rank bully Vorlan waited near the main doors. Vorlan acted like he owned the guild hall, looking for an excuse to flex authority. Vorlan attempted to provoke Aldrin, but the young receptionist Murray stepped between them. When Vorlan directed harsh threats at Murray, Aldrin prepared to draw his blade and execute him. Before blood hit the floor, Guild Chief Orban intervened to stop the escalation. The old chief ordered Vorlan away, pulling Aldrin into a private office. Orban urged Aldrin to avoid killing Vorlan, as top missions required Vorlan's team. In deference to guild politics, Aldrin made clear another provocation would end Vorlan's life. Wrapping up a routine quest that afternoon, Aldrin scheduled the following day off. Aldrin needed uninterrupted time to research safe consumption methods for the Ognar fruit. His stash contained numerous other toxic specimens ready for stat absorption. Surviving incoming city threats required pushing his physical attributes higher immediately. Aldrin visited a quiet church in Osterhall to review his updated status sheet. For a full week, Aldrin chewed through toxic forest plants, testing if their poisons would force his stats up. An elderly priest agreed to evaluate his attributes for a single gold coin. The numbers paid off, revealing sharp gains in both his physical strength and mana pool. Pinpointing which flora yielded results meant ingesting specific leaves and returning to the altar for constant checkups. By dusk, the old priest sat thoroughly drained, though Aldrin compensated him well for the endless assessments. Next, Aldrin swung by a shop called the Wandering Cat to locate the shopkeeper, Tilda. Tilda was a bubbly alchemist who knew potion recipes inside and out. Handing over a batch of dangerous barbed leaves from the woods, Aldrin requested she brew them into a solution. Crafting it took real skill, so he paid 2 gold coins up front, and Tilda guaranteed delivery within a week. Over the following days, Aldrin stuck to low-level guild tasks. Vorlan, the platinum rank bully who usually tormented him, stayed out of sight. That piece came directly from Maret, the receptionist who had called out the bully earlier. Noticing Maret had vanished from her post recently, Aldrin felt a quiet pulse of concern. Moods lifted when his companion Doric finally earned his silver rank badge. Now Aldrin, Doric, and their mage Nesca could tackle their first real silver rank contract, weighing 3 distinct monster targets. The choices included an ice-breathing frost panther and a forest doll lurking in tree bark. Their top candidate was the Toxin Hound, a venomous undead wolf that stalked prey under cover of night. Thanks to Aldrin's innate immunity trait, poison posed zero danger to him, making the creature an ideal target for the team. Sitting in the Adventurers Guild, Aldrin, Doric, and Nesca debated their choice. Their eyes landed on Meret behind the counter, looking pale and overwhelmed. Merritt revealed a massive horde of orcs was marching straight toward Osterhall. Standard protocol called for high-ranked veterans to handle an invasion, but Vorlan and his squad refused to mobilize out of sheer spite. High-rank requirements aside, the threat remained on their doorstep, so Aldrin and his trio volunteered to intercept the pack. Marching north to the marshlands, the party prepared an ambush site. Thick mud would mire the advancing greenskins, while Nesca rained spells from high ground, leaving Aldrin and Doric to butcher whoever managed to drag themselves onto solid bank. Right on schedule, roughly 20 orcs lumbered into the bog. Front lines packed armored warriors, anchored by a towering orc general. Nesca opened the engagement, launching a barrage of magical projectiles. When one brute broke through the silt, Aldrin dropped it with a single stroke. Doric struggled initially as his blade bounced off Dint's hide, but encouragement from his allies shifted Doric's focus to vulnerable joints, felling his target. Meanwhile, Neshka activated her mana efficiency passive, sustaining her bombardment without draining her reserve, methodically burning down lesser orcs trapped knee-deep in slough. The dynamic shifted when the armored orc knights and their general waded forward. Raising massive shields, the elite vanguard deflected every incoming spell without breaking stride. Unscathed, the 3 heavyweights reached dry land, signaling the true fight had arrived. Flame spells cleared out the last stragglers as Nesca secured the marsh perimeter. That left only 2 elite knights and the massive general standing. Acting as squad leader, Aldrin assigned the 2 knights to his allies while he locked eyes with the boss. Doric let out a roaring taunt, drawing the guards' attention away, giving Aldrin room to step around their flank and engage the leader. The orc general towered over the field, wrapped in golden fur and brandishing a massive weapon. Activating a fiery crimson aura, the beast surged with speed, yet Aldrin easily matched the tempo. Tracking every windup, Aldrin ducked beneath wide, crushing blows. A few sharp thrusts drew blood, forcing desperation into the general's eyes. As the brute overextended on a swing, Aldrin stepped inside its guard and drove his steel home. Behind him, Doric and Nesca kept their momentum absolute. Doric anchored his tower shield against heavy swings, while Nesca shattered the knight's armor with precise magic. With the battlefield silent, Aldrin commended his team's execution. Though modest about their victory, the trio had executed the trap without a flaw. After severing the orc ears as proof of bounty, the party returned to Osterhall. Inside the guild hall, the group spotted Vorlan grandstanding before the staff. The bully was forcing receptionists to plead for his intervention, convinced the town faced ruin. Walking up to the counter, Aldrin dumped a heavy sack of orc ears onto the table. Red-faced and humiliated, Vorlan sneered and stormed out into the street. Aldrin had just wiped out an entire raiding party. But instead of a warm welcome, the guild chief immediately started shouting at him. Terrified of Vorlan, the platinum-rank adventurer, the chief feared Aldrin's feud would drag the guild into disaster. Aldrin stood his ground, calling the chief a coward for groveling to a bully. If the guild could only survive as Vorlan's puppet, Aldrin snapped, then it wasn't worth saving at all. A level-headed young man quickly stepped between them to cool the room down. The vice chief offered a calmer, far more reasonable presence than his superior. Apologizing for the chief's outburst, the vice chief thanked Aldrin for defending the town. Vorlan held a stranglehold over every local adventurer, the vice chief admitted. And the chief was simply too panicked about losing his position to act reasonably. Aldrin respected the vice chief's candor, though the guild's leadership clearly remained a disaster. Securing proper payments required proof, so Aldrin produced the slain orc general's corpse. Aldrin made sure the receptionist, Merritt, received official credit for issuing the contract, so the chief wouldn't retaliate against her. Following the meeting, Aldrin dragged the heavy corpse deep into the Kelvane forest. Dropping the body near a dark plant called the Ognar, Aldrin wanted to test if the flora would infest monster flesh. Plucking a fresh fruit from the stalk, Aldrin returned home long after dark. At sunrise, Aldrin, his loudmouth friend Doric, and their squad mate Nesca headed back to the guild hall to collect their bounty. The vice chief handed over 2 platinum and 5 gold coins in person. Doric leaped in celebration at the massive fortune, while Aldrin and Nesca kept their composure. Refusing to call it a day, the party decided to pick their first official silver rank contract. The trio selected a bounty targeting a frost panther in the northern mountains, far beyond a simple wild beast. This monster moved with blinding speed and channeled elemental magic. Despite the brutal step-up in danger, the party felt ready for the challenge. Marching out toward the northern reaches, Aldrin briefed the squad on the Panther's speed and lethal reach. Doric, the Holy Knight who normally absorbed every blow for the team, informed Aldrin that he wanted to step away from frontline defense for a while. Driven by his ambition to become the strongest adventurer alive, Doric wanted to focus purely on offense. Aldrin approved, recognizing that expanding Doric's combat skills would benefit the whole party. Nesca, the group's mage, sought to revamp her combat style as well. Nesca aimed to maximize the raw destruction behind her spells, accepting that higher power meant sacrificing precision. Unfamiliar with magic theory, Aldrin advised Nesca to trust her instincts and commit fully without second-guessing. Traversing the snow-capped northern peaks, the group searched for the Frost Panther terrorizing local travelers. After hours of scouring the frozen trails, Aldrin picked up a heavy presence charging toward them. A massive panther featuring snow-white fur and icy blue markings bounded down the slope. With Doric testing his aggressive style, Aldrin took the front line as their shield. Bracing his buckler, Aldrin slammed the beast out of midair and smashed it against the frozen dirt. Swift and cunning, the creature lashed out with wind blades and encased its fangs in jagged ice. Nesca stepped up to unleash a devastating fireball, but prioritizing raw output over precision caused her spell to blast wide of the target. Doric leaped down from a high ledge to deliver a crushing overhead strike, but the panther erupted sharp ice spines across its spine, blocking the attack cold. Lunging through the opening, Aldrin drove his blade deep into the beast's throat and underbelly. Bleeding profusely, the panther abandoned the fight and fled into the crags, leaving a crimson trail leading to a narrow cave entrance. Entering the cavern, the party found the monster collapsed, dead on the stone. Preparing to claim a proof-of-kill trophy, the party paused at a faint whimper beneath the creature's flank. Wiggling out from under the corpse was a newborn Frost Panther cub, completely white. Abandoning the cub meant guaranteed starvation, while allowing the beast to mature guaranteed it would hunt humans down the road. Aldrin argued that ending its life right now was the safest option for everyone. Guilt-stricken from slaying the mother, Doric and Nesca refused to let Aldrin kill it. The pair begged Aldrin to let them adopt the cub and raise it themselves. Nuzzling up against Aldrin's boots, the tiny creature acted so helpless that Aldrin finally relented. Aldrin sternly warned his teammates that every consequence fell squarely on their shoulders. Raising a monster inside city limits was a massive risk. Yet, the party agreed to take the gamble and bring the cub home. Doric tucked the tiny Frost Panther inside his traveler's pack. The cub popped its head out over the canvas, looking completely harmless. Though Aldrin found the scene adorable, heavy anxiety lingered over him. If the cub ever realized they had killed its mother, disaster was bound to follow. Aldrin made Doric and Nesca promise this rescue was a one-time exception, not a routine habit. Once outside the cave, Aldrin buried the mother panther before catching up with the party. Sneaking the cub past the front desk, the party brought it inside the inn undetected. Inside their room, Doric and Nesca fawned endlessly over the small beast, though. Aldrin cut in with a harsh truth. They had slain its mother and were now raising the orphan. Regardless of the tragedy, the cub took a liking to Aldrin, persistently licking his hand. Realizing an inn wouldn't host a monster long-term, the group agreed to lease a proper home. A real home suited Aldrin perfectly, considering his primary class was farmer. Despite his combat prowess, his skill tree specialized in cultivating vegetation. A private yard would let him cultivate toxic flora to build up his physical attributes. Doric argued for a fierce name like Ravok, while Nesca insisted on something softer, like Patala. Settling the debate, Aldrin named the cub Bella. As soon as it drifted off, the trio walked over to the Wandering Cat Tavern to meet Tilda, an alchemist. Aldrin planned to introduce his party and collect a custom batch of brews. Though Tilda had initially pegged Aldrin as a creep, her high-energy craft was genuine, and she passed him an ominous vial. Panic crossed her face when she realized Aldrin intended to swallow the dangerous liquid. Reassuring the alchemist, Aldrin revealed his passive skill, Null Toxin. The ability allowed him to ingest lethal poisons to boost stats without taking damage. With their transaction complete, the group made their way back to the inn. Along the walk, Doric teased Aldrin for fretting over the panther cub. By sunrise, Bela was bursting with energy, darting around the floorboards. Seeing how fast the creature was growing, finding a permanent house became urgent. Doric and Nesca took low-tier guild jobs for coin, while Aldrin sought out a realtor named Leonard. Aldrin requested a spacious, standalone property, stressing a tight budget. Leonard located an ideal estate in a prime district priced far below market value. The catch stemmed from a former owner's suicide, which left superstitious buyers terrified. Unfazed by ghost stories, Aldrin prioritized raw square footage and cheap rent. Signing the lease immediately, he scheduled their move for the following morning. Returning to the room, Aldrin found Bella bounding over in excitement. Without delay, Aldrin began packing their gear for the relocation. Bella hovered near Aldrin's ankles, clinging to him like an over-affectionate hound. Feeding the cub a bowl of milk, Aldrin tried leaving for a stat appraisal, but Bella tugged his hem. Giving in to the creature, Aldrin scooped Bella into his travel bag and walked toward the church. The duty priest slumped behind his desk, thoroughly bored in the empty sanctuary. Taking a seat for his stat evaluation, Aldrin watched impressive figures appear. A steady diet of rare Lazar and Ognar fruits was finally paying off. Both his strength and agility metrics had surged past previous limits. His recent battle against the Orc General had provided an additional baseline gain. Testing his new concoctions, Aldrin stepped toward a secluded pond and downed a Jin Pea potion. The murky draught hit his tongue with the sharp taste of bitter soil and crushed foliage. Returning inside for a second check, his agility score had climbed another 2 points. Satisfaction washed over Aldrin as his herb regimen clicked into place across every attribute before morning came. Gathering Doric and Nesca early, Aldrin led the party toward their new residence. The property proved to be a sprawling manor with expansive grounds, costing a bargain 6 gold monthly. Local stigma kept the price bottomed out following the prior owner's suicide. While specters made Doric uneasy, Aldrin brushed off the superstition entirely. Any restless spirits or rogue beasts that manifested would simply become experience. 8 spacious bedchambers lined the upper floor of the mansion. Aldrin immediately earmarked the spare rooms for cultivating toxic herbs indoors. Assuring his companions, he claimed the indoor greenery posed no danger. Empty pockets meant unfurnished floors and sleeping bags for the night, though. Securing a home base of their own filled the trio with pride. Depleted funds forced the group to accept a commission in the Kelvane region. Their target was a cluster of forest dolls, tree-mimicking monsters ambushing local woodsmen. Nearby mercenaries whispered about Aldrin's feud with the elite fighter Vorlan, but the party brushed off the rumors. To draw out the camouflage beasts, Aldrin unholstered an enchanted flute borrowed from the Vice Guildmaster. Armed with the artifact, Aldrin, Doric, and Nesca pressed deeper into the tree line. The instrument carried a single enchantment, forcing disguised forest dolls into plain view. As they trekked, Aldrin brought up Nesca's spellcasting technique. During their previous battle, fear of missing her mark had led her to cast a low-tier spell. Aldrin's blunt advice left no doubt. If Nesca wanted real power, she had to stop playing it safe. Taking his words to heart, Nesca vowed to push her limits and take bigger risks. High notes from the magic flute rang out, rattling a nearby tree violently. Spotting the beast, Aldrin struck it with a light fire arrow, drawing an annoyed groan from Doric over the weak hit. Nesca quickly noted that a full fire blast would have set the entire forest ablaze. While Aldrin lunged forward to draw the doll's attention, Doric brought his blade down in a crushing strike. Shifting to foraging, Aldrin drew on his botanical knowledge to guide them toward rare herbs. A week of hunting wood dolls and harvesting flora filled their pouches with gold coin. Back at their home, the Frost Panther cub Bella put on size at a staggering pace. Monster blood ran in its veins. Yet the cub bounded around like a cheerful dog. Knowing survival demanded sharp instincts, Aldrin prepared to teach the young panther how to hunt. A week-long expedition back to his forest cabin went into motion. Doric and Nesca mourned the temporary parting, as if the cub were leaving forever. Stepping under the thick canopy, Aldrin set his overarching plans into motion. Inspecting the slain Orc General, Aldrin sought a rare, power-enhancing fruit grown from the corpse. Training Bella came first, so Aldrin snagged a wild rabbit and offered raw meat to build a killer's appetite. Next came a live squirrel, set loose right before the cub to trigger a predatory chase. Rather than striking, Bela trotted after the creature in playful curiosity. Exhausted from play, the cub and the squirrel curled together into a cozy nap. Leaving the sleeping pair behind, Aldrin headed out into the brush to complete his herb gathering. 6 days slipped by as the cub bonded with its new companion, while Aldrin gathered every plant on his list. Wrapping up his work with Bella, the young farmer harvested rare seeds from the damp earth, alongside spore-rich mushroom logs destined for his home garden plots. Future plans called for collaborating with Tilda to refine these ingredients into potions. Before departing, Aldrin inspected a parasitic Ognar vine planted inside the corpse of the fallen Orc General. The growth had withered completely because the General's heart was damaged during battle, revealing to Aldrin that Ognar seeds required an intact heart to anchor their roots. Undeterred by failure, Aldrin resolved to test the seed on a fresh beast's carcass at the next opportunity. Nearing the city of Osterhall, Bela perked its ears, picking up a goblin ambush before anyone else. Small size notwithstanding, the panther pounced forward, dropping 2 goblins with bursts of ice and wind magic. Staring at the frozen corpses, Aldrin marveled at the sheer power packed in the small cub. Battle instincts like that pointed to Bela being a true prodigy in combat. Reaching the house, Aldrin found Doric and Nesca waiting by the threshold. Doric stood eager for action alongside Nesca, a skilled mage with her spellbooks ready. Both companions pressed forward to greet Bela and listen to the story of the forest trip. After brief deliberation, the party agreed to bring the cub along on official missions. Nestled safely inside Nesca's bag, Bela could observe combat without getting into trouble. Over the next 2 weeks, the team stayed busy taking on silver rank quests. Bela became an expert at finishing off monsters, while nearby, Doric and Nesca improved their fighting skills significantly. Most importantly, Aldrin's gardening project turned into a total success, yielding all 5 varieties of attribute-boosting plants right inside his house. Tending to poisonous plants and toxic mushrooms at home occupied Aldrin's time. Class traits from his farmer job kept the plants healthy and free of bugs. Curious whether these homegrown versions were stronger than wild ones, Aldrin kept the crops separated to test their effects later. Stepping through the guild hall doors, Aldrin, Doric, and Nesca found the place in total chaos. Panicked chatter revealed that a nest of giant venom pythons had infested the northern mountain. These 10-meter monsters hunted aggressively, using heat sensing to locate prey. Their poison ran so lethal that a single bite could end a life instantly. Just as Aldrin decided to accept the quest, the arrogant, high-ranked adventurer Vorlan interfered. Built like a wall, Vorlan had already caused trouble for Aldrin in the past. Guild Chief Orban openly favored Vorlan, threatening to expel Aldrin forever if he refused to cooperate. Left with no choice, Aldrin agreed while quietly planning to make Vorlan regret his arrogance. Before heading out, the party visited Tilda, the hyperactive owner of the local potion shop. Though Tilda's frantic excitement could be overwhelming, her skill was genuine, and the potion master supplied them with vital healing draughts and anti-poison potions. Fully equipped, the team reached the snowy mountains, only to find Vorlan and his crew missing. After waiting 2 hours, Aldrin refused to waste more time and started the climb with just Doric and Nesca. Scaling the peak, they discovered a dead frost panther, brought down effortlessly by a python bite. That proves just how deadly these venom pythons truly are. With the freezing cold air setting in, the team pulled on heavy coats and prepared for a tough fight. Aldrin, Nesca, and Doric trekked up a snowy mountain on the hunt for venom pythons. Thanks to his null toxin skill, Aldrin was completely immune to any toxic attack. Higher up, they spotted a massive black python lurking near a tree, stalking a deer. Knowing these snakes hated intense heat, Aldrin told Nesca to blind it with a blast of fire magic. Once the serpent struck the deer, Nesca unleashed her flames directly at it. Aldrin lunged forward and severed its throat with one clean strike. With the python's venom useless against Aldrin, the fight was over in seconds. Continuing up the peak, Aldrin borrowed Doric's blade to practice dual wielding. Out of nowhere, Vorlan and his party cut off their path. Vorlan was an old rival holding a bitter grudge against Aldrin. Vorlan had lured 4 extra pythons and dragged them right to the party to get them killed. Activating a cushion skill, Vorlan leaped off the cliff, leaving Aldrin surrounded by 6 enraged snakes. Knowing Doric and Nesca lacked poison immunity, Aldrin realized they were in grave danger. Aldrin ordered them to take cover behind a magic earth wall. Stepping forward alone, Aldrin faced all 6 massive pythons himself. Aldrin coated his own twin blades with venom to maximize every slash. Fear gave way to absolute focus, making time feel like it slowed to a crawl. As the first python lunged with a fast bite, Aldrin sidestepped and stabbed it right in the neck. Aldrin slammed his boot into the heavy carcass to clear room to maneuver. 2 more pythons lunged simultaneously, one striking low from the ground and the other from above. Keeping his cool, Aldrin locked his focus on the grounded attacker first. Redirecting the snake's momentum, Aldrin delivered a crushing blow that killed it instantly. Turning on the third python, Aldrin stabbed it repeatedly until its body went limp. The remaining beasts spewed toxic clouds, but Aldrin walked straight through the mist unharmed. With 3 pythons down, Aldrin pressed forward to finish off the remaining trio. Slaying the last python, Aldrin felt exhaustion weigh heavily on his body. Pushing far beyond his limits had honed his combat skills to a razor edge. Aldrin called out to Nesca and Doric behind their earth barrier. As the barrier dropped, tears ran down their faces in pure relief. Aldrin chuckled to ease the mood. though he kept his distance while coated in snake venom. Slicing off the python tongues to collect their quest proof, the group discussed their next move. Aldrin was done playing nice and decided Vorlon had crossed the line. The coward who tried to get them killed needed to be eliminated. Dork and Nesca hesitated at the thought of killing another adventurer, but they realized Vorlan would never stop being a threat. So, they agreed to back Aldrin up. Abandoning the hunt, the team pursued Vorlon's party as they retreated toward the city. Catching up in the marshlands, they found Vorlon celebrating Aldrin's death, until Vorlon saw Aldrin standing there and turned ghostly pale. Aldrin tossed the sack of python tongues onto the mud right in front of them. At the sight of the bloody trophies, Vorlon's followers lost their nerve instantly. Throwing down their weapons, the lackeys dropped to their knees and begged for mercy. Realizing Aldrin was far beyond their level, they shrank back as Aldrin challenged Vorlon to single combat. Vorlon activated all his magic skills to boost his strength, but he was still slower than the monsters Aldrin had just killed, allowing Aldrin to slice his arm effortlessly. Platinum rank or not, Vorlan was a coward who only bullied those weaker than himself. The sting of a single wound sent Vorlan collapsing into the dirt, weeping uncontrollably. Aldrin saw how pathetic Vorlan truly was when faced with a real fight. Unwilling to let his friends witness the dark act ahead, Aldrin decided to handle it alone. Aldrin asked Dork and Nesca to return to the city ahead of him, and Dork led a hesitant Nesca away. With his friends gone, Aldrin turned back toward Vorlan and his trembling followers. To avoid raising suspicion with the city guards, Aldrin needed to make Vorlan's death look like a fatal monster attack. Looking down at the terrified lackeys, Aldrin made it clear their lives were on the line. Tears streamed down their faces as the 4 lackeys pleaded for survival. Aldrin offered them one condition to stay alive: turn on their leader, Vorlan, and finish him off. Desperate to live, the lackeys drew their swords and attacked Vorlan until he could no longer move. Though Vorlan whimpered for mercy with his final breath, Aldrin delivered a lethal strike to end his life for good. Without a trace of guilt, Aldrin absorbed Vorlan's skills and prepared to move on. Aldrin swore to himself that he would protect decent people, but show zero mercy toward anyone who tried to harm him. To cover up the kill, Aldrin forced the lackeys to haul the corpse into the forest in a sack. He ordered them to tell the guild that Vorlan was devoured by giant serpents. Deep in the woods, he dragged the body toward a magical tree known as the Ognar. Using Vorlan's corpse as host soil, Aldrin planned to cultivate a powerful creature. A grim experiment, but since Vorlan was already dead, his remains might as well serve a purpose. After securing the body, Aldrin washed off the blood and returned to town. Back at his cottage, Dork and Nesca were waiting for him alongside Bella, joined by a cheerful girl named Tilda, who had brought food for a feast. Exhausted as Aldrin was, his friend's easy laughter took the weight off his shoulders while they drank late into the night, pushing away thoughts of Vorlan's murder to celebrate surviving the ordeal. As the party went on, a dangerous traveler entered town under a downpour. The stranger stood tall in black garb, missing an arm with a jagged scar across his face. An assassin from the underworld, he was hunting for Aldrin. When local thugs bumped into him, the killer dragged them into a dark alley and demanded Aldrin's whereabouts. And when they offered no answers, he cut their throats without a second thought. He was a ruthless monster who would not stop until he found his mark. A week later, life settled down. The guild officially ruled Vorlan's death an accident, and his remaining squad left town for good. Having completed such a massive contract, Aldrin's party received a massive cash reward and earned promotions to gold rank. Even the former guild chief stepped down and offered a formal apology, giving the group a clean slate. One morning, Dork handed Aldrin a special package sent by the new guild chief. Inside rested a vial of potent venom harvested from the pythons they had slain, precisely the ingredient Aldrin required for his next project. Aldrin decided to test his limits by swallowing the python venom. He needed to check whether raw poison increased his strength, or if the effect came solely from herb consumption. Protected by his null toxin skill, he faced no risk of fatal poisoning. If drinking it yielded no growth, he could still coat his steel in the deadly fluid. Dork, the former street orphan turned gold rank adventurer, brought fresh word from guild headquarters. Aldrin's younger brother Sorvin was making waves as a heroic prodigy. Sorvin had cleared a legendary dungeon in record time to reach diamond rank, putting him 3 tiers above Aldrin. Furthermore, sightings reported a scarred, middle-aged man asking around for Aldrin in a neighboring city. Sorvin was clearly keeping up the hunt for his brother. Far from losing nerve, Aldrin felt a surge of drive to close the power gap between them. 2 weeks later, Aldrin ventured back into the wilderness, while his companions, Dork and Nesca, headed into the city to gather intel on their tracker. Aldrin needed to harvest an ognar plant, a sinister specimen that sprouts from corpses and yields stat-boosting fruit. Reaching the clearing, he inspected the body of Vorlon, the bully he had slain earlier. A healthy ognar sapling had rooted directly in Vorlon's chest. Grim as the sight was, fruit grown from human flesh packed far more potency than monster-grown yields. Pushing deeper into the canopy, Aldrin encountered a massive, colorful avian beast. The monster stood at least at gold rank and posed an extreme threat. It performed strange rhythmic movements to build muscle tone and relied on deafening screeches to navigate due to weak sight. Aldrin tried to stalk the creature to disable its wings, but the bird caught his scent and leaped airborne. It lunged with rapid, heavy kicks and razor claws. Outpaced by its quick footwork, Aldrin realized retreat was impossible. Committing fully to the clash, he triggered the heightened focus known as the zone, a childhood state his fragile frame had failed to sustain back then. Now, forged by dozens of power-enhancing herbs, his physical frame could handle the mental strain. Perception slowed, letting Aldrin track every movement of the beast. He calculated that by keeping quiet and using trunks for cover, the monster's echolocation would fail to pinpoint him. Mind and body synced at last. Aldrin braced to end the fight. Slipping between trunks, he waited for the avian beast to lose his trail. Guided by its keen hearing, the creature prowled close as Aldrin shifted soundlessly through shadows. The giant bird eventually stepped directly beneath the branch where Aldrin perched. Dropping down, he shredded its wing to ground the beast, then leaped onto its back. He hammered strike after strike into its hide until the monster buckled. Driven by a final plunge into its skull, the creature breathed its last. Exhausted from the sheer intensity, Aldrin collapsed onto the forest floor. Despite his exhaustion, Aldrin refused to leave the monster's carcass behind. The corpse was vital fuel for growing ognar plants, which absorb power from mighty beasts. Hauling the massive avian back to his hidden plot, he left it to decay into fertilizer. 10 days passed before Aldrin returned to inspect the crop. Sprouting from Vorlon's buried remains, the magical stalk had grown monstrously huge. It towered 5 times its normal size, bearing a giant fruit ripe for harvest. Meanwhile, a fresh green shoot was already breaking through the bird's feathers. Satisfied with the yield, the young farmer journeyed back toward Osterhall. Stepping through his doorway, he was immediately greeted as Bella rushed forward. The beast had expanded rapidly, nearly doubling its original size. Dork and Nesca had returned from their venture with plenty to report. They warned that a scarred, one-armed stranger was hunting for him in a nearby settlement. Unable to identify the stalker, they had instead crossed paths with the Silver Wing Lions. Led by a veteran beastman, the high-rank group had offered the pair valuable martial instruction. Morning came, and Aldrin visited the chapel to measure his status card, where everyone's job is listed. Though registered as a simple farmer, his numerical values contradicted the lowly title. Consuming toxic flora and surviving desperate battles had altered his baseline parameters. In pure force and velocity, his ratings rivaled veteran frontline warriors. Testing the true potency of his harvest, he swallowed a fresh, homegrown yield before returning to the priest for a reassessment, where the outcome shattered his expectations. Cultivated flora provided double the attribute gains compared to wild specimens. Relief washed over him as his laborious cultivation yielded terrifying martial power. Cultivating toxic herbs inside his quarters eliminated long treks into the wilderness. Though field foraging held its appeal, domestic cultivation streamlined his growth. Experimenting with pure viper venom procured from a local leader yielded surprising results, though a subsequent status read revealed zero improvement in his attributes. Raw venom was useless. Only the plant matter itself refined his bodily traits. Now came the true test. Consuming the swollen fruit nourished on Vorlon's corpse. Anticipation mixed with dread, as he knew the flavor would be revolting. Stash containers of honey, spices, and bitter beans sat ready. The green fruit resembled a common apple, yet, biting in, flooded his mouth with the rank taste of decayed flesh and rust. Violent retching seized his throat, but he grimly swallowed every single bite. Drenched in cold sweat and physically drained, he finished the final piece. An hour afterward, Aldrin presented his card to the temple priest once more. Scanning the updated slate, the sheer numerical surge stunned him, along with 3 acquired abilities: skin strengthen, flesh enhancement, and fortification. Such explosive growth seemed impossible for a class designated as a humble farmer. For the first time, he was closing the gap between himself and legendary combatants. Heading out to the open plains, Aldrin prepared to test his new toolkit. Skin strengthen hardened his hide like dense timber, shrugging off light strikes. Flesh enhancement purged weight from his limbs, granting explosive quickness and accelerating his blade strikes beyond the eye's ability to follow. Fortification anchored his body in exchange for stone-like durability. Activating all three turned him into a juggernaut, though it rapidly burned through his stamina. Drills against wild goblins occupied his afternoon as he adjusted to the techniques. Deep fatigue still weighed down his marrow when morning broke. Joining his party in the common space, he found Doric, a stalwart holy knight, alongside Neska, their gifted mage. Over rice and grilled fish, Aldrin detailed his newly acquired traits. Both companions stared in disbelief at his overnight leap in power. Rather than harboring envy, the news ignited their drive to keep pace with him. Together, the trio walked to the sanctuary for a team evaluation. Though weary from Aldrin's constant visits, the clergyman performed the rite. Sacred magic washed over their status cards, updating their records, prompting puzzled frowns from Doric and Neska as they read the numbers. Though their attributes had risen, neither felt the gain matched their recent exertions. Aldrin took the parchment slates to evaluate the growth himself. Inspecting their numbers side by side, he gauged their progress. Neska boasted an immense mana pool that dwarfed her former limits. Doric's card reflected towering physical resilience and martial vigor. Despite his lower base status, Aldrin's plant-boosted power made him the deadliest warrior in the room. Every member was growing stronger, cementing the party into a cohesive unit. Stepping into the Adventurer Guild felt far more welcoming with that tyrant Vorlin finally gone. Ferric, a weary vice chief currently managing operations, stepped forward to greet them. The vice chief noted that gold rank requests typically demand attribute scores hovering around 80. While Doric fell slightly short on raw numbers, Aldrin knew their combined abilities easily qualified them for gold rank work. Selecting a contract to inspect an ancient ruins golem, the party set out as Neska shared local lore. She detailed how an archmage of old forged these stone automatons to serve as living siege weapons, but their uncontrollable rage forced ancient mages to entomb them deep underground. Reaching the crumbled site, the adventurers discovered a stone stairwell descending into darkness. At the bottom of a dust-choked chamber stood a 5-meter titan forged from rock and iron plates. Though it seemed dormant at first, glowing blue runes flared across the floor as they drew near. The construct lurched upward and slammed its fist down, sealing the exit with fallen rubble as Aldrin kept his composure. Ordering Doric and Neska to prepare their heavy spells, Aldrin braced himself at the front line, hardening his skin with defensive magic. The young warrior squared his shoulders to absorb the construct's charge. Assuming the vanguard role, Aldrin reinforced his defense with layer upon layer of physical enhancements. Positioned squarely before the giant, the frontline fighter deflected massive iron fist strikes using his buckler. Thanks to his fortified defense stats, those bone-shattering blows bounced harmlessly off his guard. Spotting the construct's sluggish pacing, Aldrin wove between strikes to maintain its aggro. Confident in holding the brute's focus, Aldrin signaled his teammates to unleash their offensive spells. Bela, their Frost Panther cub, pounced alongside them as the party executed a seamless assault. Combining frost magic, Neska and the cub targeted the construct's critical vulnerability to extreme cold. Even as a glowing crest on the machine's chest boosted its movement, Aldrin comfortably outpaced its swings. Neska encased the golem's torso in solid ice, while Doric carved through its stone knee joints. Leaping onto the chest plate, Bela ripped out the glowing power core and collapsed the construct into rubble. Collecting the magical core and metal salvage, the party returned to their employer, an elderly mage named Wendell. Wendell was an eccentric scholar, originally hailing from the capital. His eyes lit up with excitement upon seeing the pristine, undamaged state of the power core. With open downtime between quests, Neska took the opportunity to ask Wendell for advanced arcane instruction. The elderly scholar readily agreed to mentor her in arcane fundamentals. Leaving Neska to her studies, Aldrin and Doric walked over to the Adventurer Guild Hall. Inside the main hall, they crossed paths with the renowned party known as the Silverwing Lions. Heading this veteran high-rank squad was a formidable beastkin named Finlar. His roster included Britta the Hunter, Ovenna the Monk, and Ottavan the Party Scout. Recognizing Doric as an old acquaintance, Fenlar invited the pair to participate in a sparring session. Gathering in an open practice field, Aldrin squared off against Fenlar with blunted wooden practice blades. Towering over 2 meters with massive shoulders, Fenlar presented an imposing wall, but Aldrin held his ground. Parrying a heavy downward strike, Aldrin deflected the Lion Man's weapon and landed a sharp blow across his exposed back. Fenlar grunted from the impact with a roar. Yet his footing never wavered. Pivoting his weight smoothly, the veteran delivered a counterpunch to Aldrin's ribs that nearly robbed him of breath. Feeling the shockwave through his ribs, Aldrin recognized that veteran strength bypassed basic defensive buffs. As a mithril-ranked elite, Finlar unleashed his true combat capabilities. Activating a high-tier movement skill, the beastkin vanished from sight and cracked 2 swift strikes against Aldrin's spine. Nursing his bruised back, Aldrin acknowledged the vast gap separating him from top-tier adventurers. The next sparring match pitted Doric against Atavan, the quiet scout of the Silverwing Lions. Doric relied on footwork and rapid flank attacks, whereas Atavan stood completely motionless. Despite a slender build, the scout evaded Doric's ambush strike, as if reading every muscle twitch in advance. Countering with effortless precision, Atavan struck 3 nerve points simultaneously to end the match, leaving Aldrin speechless. Atavan revealed that despite his meager physical stats, his build featured 18 distinct utility skills. His combat effectiveness relied on cycling between those active abilities in split-second intervals. Impressed by the fluid technique, Aldrin immediately requested instruction from the scout. Fenlar blinked in surprise, having expected the newcomer to request guidance from the party leader. But Aldrin favored technical precision over brute strength, throwing himself into a grueling drill regimen. For hours, the scout forced Aldrin to practice rapid skill toggling without delay. Though the concept seemed basic, instant activation consumed massive amounts of mental stamina. Demonstrating his true mastery, Atavan activated multiple abilities simultaneously and entirely without verbal incantations. Instant, chantless casting transformed the quiet scout into a lethal combatant. Exhausted and aching by sunset, Aldrin nevertheless felt a profound shift in his tactical awareness. Out of genuine respect for the scout's discipline, Aldrin began addressing Atavan as his master. Fenlar grumbled good-naturedly at being passed over after winning his own duel, but Aldrin directed all his focus toward mastering this seamless style of skill rotation. Aldrin recognized that mastering skill control like Atavan offered the quickest path to power. High-ranked adventurer Fenlar was taken aback by Aldrin's nerve, yet he respected the boy's fire. For 2 weeks, Fenlar's squad, the Silverwing Lions, put Aldrin and Doric through non-stop drills. Atavan, their veteran skill instructor, spearheaded every session. Doric proved a natural defensive prodigy, brick-walling blows as a holy knight. Fenlar urged Doric to specialize strictly as a tank, but Aldrin flatly refused. Aldrin saw world-class potential in Doric and refused to cap his growth. Hearing Fenlar confess he quit dreaming after meeting top-tier monsters, Aldrin mocked him for giving up. Eventually, the party retreated to Aldrin's residence in Osterhall. The estate was massive, yet dirt cheap, thanks to its previous owner's suicide. Spirit-sensing monk Ovina detected an eerie vibe from the building, unnerving Fenlar. The moment they stepped inside, Aldrin's frost panther cub Bella pounced straight onto Fenlar's face. While the squad found the fluffy cub adorable, they froze upon learning Bella wasn't a bound familiar at all. Aldrin was casually housing a wild monster, defying every safety law. 14 days of grueling instruction finally drew to a close. Aldrin's technique advanced to silent skill activation, skipping vocal incantations entirely. Before the Silverwing Lions set off for Norvane, Aldrin pulled Fenlar aside with a grim warning. Aldrin revealed a lethal, one-armed hunter with a scarred forehead was tailing him. He urged them to watch their backs and keep his name off their lips in town. Fenlar laughed off the caution, though Aldrin knew the danger was deadly real. Once their mentors departed, Aldrin and Doric checked on Nesca. She had been grinding relentlessly inside ancient ruins under the wizard Wendell. Her spellwork had surged, unlocking high-potency intermediate fire magic. Witnessing Nesca's explosive gains fired up Aldrin to push harder. Aldrin resolved to visit the Adventurers Guild and register Bella as a legitimate familiar. That legal status would spare the cub from living stashed inside a satchel. Aldrin arranged a private meeting with the guild's vice chief to request an exception. Normally, owning a beast required an official monster tamer class. Registering a wild beast like Bella presented a tricky bureaucratic challenge. The vice chief granted approval, strictly warning that Bella must be controlled. Aldrin walked out with an official permit card granting Bella legal city passage. Despite having documentation, the party kept Bella concealed to avoid alarming citizens. Later on, Aldrin dropped by the Wandering Cat to meet the alchemist Tilda. Tilda was boisterous and clingy, yet unmatched in brewing potions. She identified the liquid Aldrin recovered earlier as a potent physical enhancer rather than poison. Its effects matched high-grade enhancement elixirs on the market. The formula granted a massive, temporary surge to raw physical force. That revelation clarified Aldrin's unbelievable strength spike during his recent battle. Aldrin spent 2 gold coins securing a prototype batch as a hidden trump card. Next morning, Aldrin led Bella into the forest toward his hidden ognar trees, which fed on monster carcasses. Bela proved a deadly hunter, tearing through goblins with wind-infused claws before Aldrin even spotted them. Reaching his secret grove, Aldrin found the corpse-fed fruits fully ripe. He harvested 2 units, ignoring their foul taste for the sake of raw power gains. A week of training flew by, with Nesca evolving into a devastating caster after mastering intermediate magic. Doric trained relentlessly too, though watching his companions outpace him weighed on his spirits. Downing the harvested fruits, Aldrin unlocked 2 powerful abilities. The first, War Dance, boosted targeted body parts through rhythmic movement. The second enhanced his hearing, letting him pinpoint lurking threats across distance. His physical speed and impact force shot up dramatically. Primed with newfound strength, the party marched into the guild hall. Aldrin selected a high-tier platinum contract targeting a massive beast named the Bloodmane. A staggering payout of 5 platinum coins was attached. And with the local champion missing, Aldrin's group stood as the sole squad capable of handling the threat. Determined to claim top status, the party finalized preparations for the hunt. Their mark, the Bloodmane, was a giant fire beast renowned for overwhelming brutality. Aldrin felt confident in their odds now that Nesca was fully battle-ready. The team's mage had dramatically expanded her spell arsenal. Victory guaranteed a massive fortune alongside a promotion to platinum rank. More crucially, Aldrin required the monster's heart to upgrade his Ognar power-up. As the party hiked toward the mountains, Bella, their pet spirit, put on a show. Moving at blur speed, it cleared every minor monster in sight before anyone could draw a weapon. Doric, the group's swordsman, pushed hard to secure a kill, but the cub beat him to every target. Exhausted and slightly annoyed, Doric still couldn't resent the creature for doing all the heavy lifting. Deep within the Bloodmane's forest territory, tension spiked as a massive red gorilla burst through the timber, broader and thicker than the rumors claim. Unarmed yet lethal, the beast wielded razor claws and thick muscular arms built for crushing armor. A deafening roar shook the canopy as the creature hammered its chest. But Aldrin moved without delay. Buffing spells flared around him, hardening his guard and surging through his muscles. The Bloodmane charged forward at impossible speed, closing the distance far faster than a brute its size had any right to. Aldrin sidestepped the initial leap, only for a heavy fist to crash toward his ribs on the rebound. Even behind a raised shield and active fortification barriers, the raw impact drove Aldrin backward across the dirt. No opponent in recent memory hit with that kind of crushing power. Far from feeling panicked, Aldrin felt adrenaline surge through his veins. Where a terrifying beast stood a moment ago, he now saw a prime target that would elevate his power. A grim smirk touched his lips while his focus settled into absolute stillness. Playtime was over, and it was time to end the engagement. Planting his boots, Aldrin held his position directly in front of the towering Bloodmane. Adjusting his stance, Aldrin signaled Nesca and Bella to initiate their offensive opening. Deflecting heavy strikes with a shield, Aldrin tracked every shift in the creature's attack cycle. Fast and violent as the beast was, Aldrin anchored its attention completely. Swelling with rage, the beast expanded its muscles as red embers ignited along its hide. Shifting from static defense, Aldrin triggered an offensive skill and began driving counter-strikes home. Torrential blasts from Nesca combined with Doric's blade work steadily drained the monster's stamina. Following a synchronized assault, Aldrin delivered the killing blow and brought the giant down. Once the dust settled, Aldrin revealed the underlying secret to Doric and Nesca. He detailed the Ognar, a lethal flora that roots in corpses to absorb their latent abilities. Consuming the fruit harvested from this plant transfers those stolen traits directly into Aldrin's pool. Hauling the heavy carcass deep into hidden woods, Aldrin deposited the remains at his growth site. Weary from the extended exertion, Aldrin turned back toward the city gates. Returning to his residence, Aldrin spotted a crimson trail smeared across his doorway. Inside lay his instructor, Atavan, clinging to the edge of life. A high-ranked veteran, Atavan had spent months refining Aldrin's combat techniques. Coughing up blood, Atavan warned that a ruthless one-armed killer named Grask had tracked them down. Grask was actively hunting Aldrin, tipped off to his city location by a former enemy named Odris. Though Atavan's squad mounted a defense, Grask proved overwhelming and slaughtered every member. Fading rapidly, Atavan urged Aldrin to feed his corpse to the Ognar so their combined strength could survive. Hesitant as Aldrin felt, he gave his word to fulfill his master's dying command. Atavan went still, leaving Aldrin standing in the quiet room, caught between grief and fury. Despite their brief time together, Audubon had been the sole mentor who genuinely took Aldrin in and held nothing back. The death of Audubon, his respected teacher, left behind a stark final warning. Before dying, Audubon confirmed that Grask, the one-armed slayer, was actively closing in on Aldrin. Dispatched by Aldrin's arch-rival Sorvin, this assassin had already wiped out an elite squad of high-tier combatants without taking a loss. Though rage burned inside Aldrin, he recognized his current skill level was no match for such a foe. Choosing survival so he could strike back later, Aldrin elected to seek refuge in the Kelvane forest. Returning to base, Aldrin briefed Doric and Nesca on the tragedy. Though stunned by the fall of their high-ranking allies, the pair agreed to follow Aldrin's strategic retreat. Prior to slipping out of Osterhall, Aldrin paid a visit to Tilda, a trusted shopkeeper. Tilda provided a stamina tonic and promised weekly covert deliveries of rations and medical supplies to their forest hideout. Setting up camp in a cleared monster den, the team traded comfort for a secure sanctuary. Aldrin began a grueling regimen, ingesting toxic herbs daily to force his power growth. Nearby, Doric and Nesca hunted forest beasts around the clock to sharpen their own capabilities. For 3 full months, the party remained underground, consumed entirely by training. Over time, Aldrin's physical core transformed, giving him virtually boundless stamina. Step by step, he was approaching the threshold needed to confront his master's killer. 90 days in the wild rebuilt Aldrin into a formidable force. Through the Ognar fruit harvested from Audubon's body, Aldrin absorbed 8 combat abilities alongside raw stat increases. Though restricted to inheriting common tier techniques, the resulting jump in power was undeniable. Meanwhile, Doric and Nesca grew significantly stronger, with Doric mastering defensive techniques and, meanwhile, Nesca's offensive spells hit far harder in real combat. Though broke, the group stood ready to slay the assassin who murdered their comrades. Returning to town, their contact Tilda verified their target's location. Grask was staying at a luxury inn, spending every evening drowned in liquor. Seeking an appraisal, Aldrin stopped by the local temple to inspect his growth. His status window revealed staggering stats and 24 active skills. Aldrin spent his remaining gold on heavy snakeskin armor for protection. Night fell, and the party made their way to a tavern called the Copper Pot. Inside, Aldrin instantly singled out a scarred, one-armed giant, Grask. As Aldrin closed in, Grask turned and triggered an appraisal skill to read his opponent. Facing the scarred, one-armed killer, Aldrin met a look of utter unconcern. Grask merely chuckled, revealing that Aldrin's own brother Sorvin had bought the hit. Wanting no interference from town guards, the fighters relocated to a desolate field beyond the walls. Grask taunted the party, scoffing at their foolish belief that they could win. Reaching the open grass, Grask unleashed his aura, suffocating the air with raw menace. Grask lunged at terrifying speed, aiming a lethal strike directly at Nesca. Doric sprinted into the path of the blow, position flawless. Raising his shield, Doric deflected the giant's fist sideways, killing its momentum completely. Seizing the opening, Aldrin darted forward and sliced deep into Grask's flank. Blood dripped from the wound, yet Grask grinned maniacally, relishing the violence. Stakes rose as Grask activated a high-tier regeneration skill, sealing his flesh in seconds. Impressed by their coordination, Grask offered them recruitment into his syndicate. Rejecting the offer, Aldrin signaled Doric and Nesca for a synchronized finishing blow. Channeling max power, Aldrin brought his longsword down on Grask's shoulder, only for the steel to shatter. Grask had hardened his skin into solid iron using a defensive skill. Without missing a beat, Grask slammed a glowing fist squarely into Aldrin's jaw. The impact launched Aldrin straight across the dirt field. Stacking every defensive buff in time saved Aldrin's life, but raw strength was still lacking. Downed combat potions surged through Aldrin as he triggered his forbidden ability, Mad Warrior. The skill strained his muscles beyond safe limits, drowning his mind in violent frenzy. Dropping broken weapons, Aldrin engaged Grask in a bloody, head-on brawl. Both combatants stood toe-to-toe, trading pulverizing hits to face and ribs. Initial parity gave way as Aldrin's movement speed steadily accelerated. Aldrin landed 3 brutal strikes for every counterpunch received. Grask's self-repair failed to match the incoming trauma, turning arrogant confidence into sheer dread. Overpowering his target completely, Aldrin snapped Grask's good arm and forced the giant to his knees. The once cocky assassin broke down, pathetic whimperings replacing earlier laughter. Grask babbled offers of gold and influence, but Aldrin saw right through the desperation. Noting old exit scars on Grask's back, Aldrin realized this killer was a fraud who fled whenever outmatched. The duel was settled, leaving Grask completely broken and helpless. Indifferent to wealth or promises, Aldrin wanted only total retribution. Activating his arm reinforcement skill, Aldrin drove a devastating strike into Grask's sternum. Grask reached out a trembling hand once before his arm went limp on the dirt. Deactivating his aura, Aldrin dropped to his knees in exhaustion, while Doric and Nesca sprinted over. The allies had watched from the sidelines, knowing Grask's raw pressure would have crushed them instantly. Aldrin thanked them, noting that their presence let him fight without reservation, though Doric and Nesca still felt guilty. Reassuring them, Aldrin admitted that even he had miscalculated Grask's true combat power. Dragging Grask's corpse into the woods, the group prepared to nourish a rare power-enhancing plant. Though ruthless, the decision felt necessary for upcoming trials, prompting Doric to reevaluate his path. Doric resolved to abandon full offense, pivoting his growth toward pure frontline defense. He committed to absorbing every blow for the team as 2 weeks of training and rest commenced. While Aldrin rested his overtaxed body, Doric and Nesca took on local guild contracts. By the end of their fortnight, the party's strength had surged to frightening levels. Gold-rank beasts that once posed lethal threats now collapsed from a single stroke. Unarmed and without activating abilities, Aldrin easily overwhelmed ordinary foes. Flushed with coin, the party set off for the metropolis of Norvane to uncover the fate of the Silverwing Lions and honor them. Accompanying them was Bela. The Frost Panther cub had grown, but it was still small enough to carry. Arriving at Norvane, the party marveled at the city's vast, bustling scale. Clearing a grueling guard inspection at the main gates, they finally crossed the threshold. Far from the pristine capital, Norvane greeted them with filthy, crowded alleyways and relentless noise. Glowing lanterns and street stalls filled the avenue with lively energy. The party headed straight for the Adventurers Guild to gather information. Aldrin activated his sensing skill, scanning the room for powerful figures. He approached a veteran in his 50s who looked tough, though he was busy ogling women across the room. When Aldrin brought up the Silverwing Lions, the man's expression flickered for a fraction of a second, but he swiftly feigned ignorance, claiming total unfamiliarity while clearly hiding something. Ignoring the grumpy old man, Aldrin approached a receptionist who radiated immense strength. Aldrin's perception revealed a massive aura suppressed beneath her quiet demeanor. Inquiring about the Silverwing Lions prompted her to lead him straight into a private room. The receptionist was actually Guildmaster Feldar, disguised behind a clever illusion. Feldar grimly confirmed the tragic news. Every Silverwing Lions member had been killed. A single member might have survived, but remained missing. Showing little reaction, Aldrin calmly asked for a reputable weapon shop. Feldar recommended a forge named Ikrin before Aldrin departed. The party visited the local church, where a priest guided them to their companions' graves, Fenlar, Britta, and Ovena. Grief weighed heavily on Doric and Nesca as they fought back tears. Aldrin left a special pendant at the tomb as a final tribute. Aldrin swore a solemn oath to exact vengeance on Sorvin for this tragedy, vowing to dedicate his life to shielding the weak from men like his brother. That night at the inn, Aldrin informed his companions that they had to leave their home in Osterhall forever. Comfort was stalling their growth, and only harsher battlegrounds would forge the strength they needed, especially with rumors placing Sorvin within the bustling city of Vandeth. Aldrin concluded they would remain in Norvane for the moment to gather intelligence. Visiting a local tavern the following morning, Aldrin encountered a drunken informant named Tolm. Tolm provided a solid lead, naming a man named Calvez as the city's premier information broker. With directions secured from the drunkard, Aldrin walked straight on to the main thoroughfare of Norvane. An hour of searching finally brought him to a sign reading Calvez House. The office occupied the second floor of a rickety building perched directly above a fish shop. Inside, paper piles cluttered a chaotic room that contained almost no furniture. Just as Aldrin turned to leave, a filthy old man reeking of fish stepped inside. The newcomer was the fishmonger from below, who dealt in secrets exclusively after dark. Despite the broker's shabby appearance, Aldrin remained to test whether his reputation held true. Aldrin pressed the broker for information regarding the hero candidate Sorvin. The broker revealed that Sorvin had cleared the Great Dungeon in Vandeth before returning to the capital. Sorvin had assembled a fresh party, recruiting a man named Radlow, who secretly commanded a ruthless street gang known as Underlid. This appointment enraged the king, who had intended his own daughter for the position. Recognizing that Sorvin pursued ambitious goals, Aldrin knew he had to maintain caution. Aldrin then visited a smithy named Akaru in search of a new blade. A master dwarven blacksmith operated the shop, producing top-tier equipment. Aldrin purchased a sturdy steel sword for 5 gold coins. During their chat, the dwarf mentioned a legendary weapon named Venditane, which supposedly belonged to the first hero and lay hidden in a perilous cave near Vandeth. Aldrin filed the clue away, eyeing it as a vital trump card for his eventual clash with Sorvin. Departing Norvain, the group journeyed back to Osterhall, debating their long-term plans along the road. Neska observed that although Norvain was a fine city, steep living costs and a lack of wilderness limited Aldrin's skill development. Consequently, the entire team, including Doric and Bella, agreed to establish their permanent home in Vandeth. Upon returning to Osterhall, they spent a full week preparing for the relocation. They offered heartfelt farewells to Tilda and the vice chief, feeling the pang of leaving the place they had long called home. Before departure, Aldrin made a final stop at the church. Aldrin asked the priest to evaluate his newly acquired skills, gained from defeating the formidable enemy Grass. Measuring his numerical progress was vital before launching the next chapter of his journey. Aldrin entered the chapel to bid the priest farewell prior to departure. Finding solitude in his quiet shrine, the priest appreciated Aldrin's visits and offered one final status check free of charge. The readout confirmed that his stats had surged significantly after recent battles. Aldrin thanked the elder and strode toward the town gates. At the exit, Doric and Neska stood waiting beside Tilda and an alchemist ally who had rendered invaluable aid. Merritt, the guild's vice chief whom Aldrin had saved earlier, came to see them off. Truly grateful, Merritt watched Aldrin hand Tilda a magic bracelet as a parting gift for her alchemy. With warm farewells spoken to the vice chief, the party set out toward the city of Vandeth. Meanwhile, trapped deep inside a dungeon, a young sage named Celine was struggling. Celine had once traveled alongside Aldrin's brother Sorvin, but her fortunes had turned. Now she was stuck trekking with Princess Isaura and her personal guard Torvald. Isaura was a war princess, and Torvald a holy knight. Both formidable, yet utterly arrogant. They treated Celine like a servant, dumping all the luggage on her and mocking her pace. Exhausted and bitter, Celine cursed Aldrin for her misery, while a week later his team reached Vandeth. Instead of returning to the wild, their Frost Panther cub Bela stayed by their side. Vandeth sprawled right next to a famous dungeon and a dangerous forest, making the city a bustling hub for high-level contracts, where they found a cheap inn called Gorash that welcomed Bella. While Doric and Neska searched the streets for Sorvin, Aldrin stayed behind to test his new powers. Slicing open his own hand, Aldrin watched the cut snap shut almost instantly through self-regeneration. Next came color change, allowing him to shift his skin tone and melt into the shadows. Finally, Aldrin tested sticky string operation, shooting durable web threads from his palms. Preparing to test their limits, Aldrin checked if the strands could withstand raw fire. Aldrin blasted the thread with fire and struck it with his sword. But the string was so tough, it didn't even show a burn or nick. At the Vandeth Guild the next day, the team spotted a legendary quest to locate a hidden cave. Rumors claimed a powerful hero's sword lay inside, and Aldrin knew he needed that weapon to eventually defeat his rival, Sorvin. The team tried to sign up for a blue ogre hunt, but the guild receptionist turned them away because their rank was too low. Seeing their plight, a veteran adventurer named Harkin stepped in. Harkin was a scruffy warrior who had survived in the business for 20 years. With his usual partners bedridden, Harkin let the party join him to officially take the contract. The group traveled into the Thornrise Mountains, a grim region where the woods felt hostile. Harkin drew on decades of experience to lead them through the wilderness. His steady guidance let them slip past roaming monsters completely undetected. Ahead in a clearing, they caught sight of their target, a massive blue ogre. Gauging its strength, Aldrin signaled the team that it was time to strike. Aldrin, Doric, and Bella moved in as a second blue ogre appeared. Both monsters loomed large, with blue skin and heavy iron axes. Doric charged forward first, drawing their attention as the ideal distraction. Bela, the white wolf, moved like a streak of frost. It lunged at the first ogre, landing a deep strike and finishing it quickly. Aldrin marveled at how strong the young beast had become. Turning to the second ogre, Aldrin used stealth to sneak behind it. With one powerful swing of his blade, Aldrin felled the monster instantly. Harkin was thoroughly impressed by how effortlessly the group handled the fight. Harkin warned them about toxic mountain miasma that worsened late in the day. Before departing, Harkin demonstrated his own skill, relying on flawless evasion rather than raw power. His precise footwork baited nearby monsters into hitting each other instead of him. Impressed by his experience, the group agreed to form a temporary party. This arrangement granted them high-rank platinum missions using Harkin's badge for a small cut of the reward. After slaying 8 ogres and making a fortune in gold, they headed back to Vandeth. Harkin offered to guide them to the city's finest spots, starting with a secret blacksmith. Navigating quiet back alleys, Harkin stopped at a stone building with smoke rising from the chimney. Inside, heat and the tang of metal filled the workshop of a dwarf named Boric. Even though Doric mostly relied on a shield, He wanted a better sword just in case. Boric was a gruff, short dwarf with a thick beard who clearly knew his way around a forge. Harkin and Boric talked like old friends, ready to help the group upgrade their gear. Harkin introduced the team to Boric, a calm dwarf who ran the local shop. Boric took an instant liking to Bella, the pet cub that looked just like a small hound. Boric offered custom leather armor for Bella for 5 silver coins, a great deal for a growing pup. Doric, the group's tank, spotted a high-quality sword forged from special steel. It cost 2 platinum coins, which was way more than Doric possessed. Despite wanting it, Doric decided to save his money and keep his old sword for now. Next, the party stopped by Relvo Market along the main street. Harkin called it the largest and busiest shop in the city, ideal for finding quality goods at fair prices. With no urgent supplies to buy, the party moved on quickly to their next destination. Soon they reached a quiet house on the city edge, where an elderly woman named Pella ran an alchemy shop. Clad in a dark robe and pointed hat, Pella looked every bit the traditional spellcaster. Aldrin asked if Pella could craft custom potions, and she agreed to brew them for a higher fee. Before they departed, Pella handed Harkin a specialized tonic to speed up the recovery of his ailing friend, Melvor. Repulsed by the sharp herbal aroma, Bela hid deep inside a traveling bag until they stepped outside. Night fell, and Harkin offered to treat the entire team to dinner at a steakhouse named Bricko Bricko. Though the small diner normally required reservations, the head cook happened to be an old acquaintance of Harkin. Following a brief negotiation over the cost, the cook opened his kitchen, despite having already shut down for the night. Eager to play the generous veteran, Harkin insisted on picking up the entire bill. Taking seats along the counter, the party watched as the cook slapped a thick, juicy slab of meat onto the grill. A rich, mouth-watering aroma filled the room, instantly sharpening everyone's appetite. The cook coated the steak with coarse salt and spices before searing it over high heat. Though still rare and crimson at the center, the seared cut looked magnificent. Serving the first round of hot plates, Harkin handed portions to Aldrin, Doric, and Nesca. Their first bites burst with intense flavor as the tender meat melted across their tongues. Every plate was scraped clean within seconds. With dinner finished, Harkin revealed that they had just eaten freshly prepared wyvern meat. The disclosure stunned them, as this restaurant was the sole establishment in Vandeth allowed to serve it. Even Bella received a bowl of raw trimmings and devoured every bite instantly. The hearty dish restored their strength and lifted everyone's spirits. The companions expressed deep gratitude to Harkin for hosting such a lavish feast. Doric vowed to repay Harkin by helping him build massive wealth down the road. Sated and contented, the group stepped back out into the cool night air. Harkin guided them toward a cozy lodge near the guild hall to conclude their city tour. Stepping inside a clean timber inn, Harkin introduced the team to his party member, Melvor. Though Melvor bore the worn expression of a youth, he was a middle-aged veteran recovering from illness. Strict house rules against animals forced them to seek other lodging, as no one would abandon Bella. Over the next fortnight, the party completed a string of high-difficulty quests alongside Harkin. Their coffers swelled with reward gold, earning them an official promotion to platinum rank. With Harkin's original squad restored to full health, both teams agreed to part ways amicably. Aldrin still marveled at how Harkin wielded such formidable combat skills without raw magic. Still, Aldrin offered sincere thanks to their guide before each adventurer set off on a personal training journey with their new fort. Aldrin chose to journey with Bella into the great forest of Rozava, hunting rare flora and honing his power. Nesca returned to her mentor, the elderly mage Wendell, to master higher-tier incantations. Determined not to fall behind, Doric spent his savings on a masterwork blade and ventured into the local dungeon alone. Aldrin and Bella finally reached the shadowed border of the great Rozava forest. The vast woodland was infamous for lethal beasts and whispered tales of a rare fruit that bestowed immense skill. While Doric and Nesca trained elsewhere in the realm, Aldrin sought this legendary fruit to claim unmatched strength. Following several hours of trekking, the pair scouted for a suitable campsite. Their strategy was straightforward: locate a monster lair, exterminate the occupants, and claim the territory. Bela caught the scent of a heavy monster pack to the southwest. A settlement of crude wooden huts emerged from the trees, housing 18 orcs. The tribe consisted of common grunts, trained soldiers, armored knights, and a dominant orc king. Rather than retreating, Aldrin welcomed the camp as an ideal testing ground for his new technique. He activated his ultimate physical release, pushing his bodily potential to its limit. Instructing Bela to hold back for an opening, Aldrin charged the perimeter alone to draw all aggression onto himself. Moving like a shadow, Aldrin deployed silent footwork to disorient the guards. Long before the sentries could sound an alarm, Aldrin had already slaughtered 8 of the basic orcs. Their sluggish reactions made the slaughter feel like child's play. Commotion swept the camp, driving more warriors tumbling from their quarters. A hulking knight bearing a massive stone tower shield stepped up to block his path, but Aldrin outmaneuvered the brute. Slipping behind the heavy guard with silent footwork, Aldrin drove his blade deep to kill the knight instantly. With their champion fallen, the surviving soldiers trembled in terror, paralyzed by their opponent's overwhelming force. Only a handful of defenders remained before the Orc King would be forced onto the field to face Aldrin. Aldrin dispatched an oncoming soldier with a swift strike through the chest. The final guard faltered, its eyes fixed in horror on the corpses of its kin. Aldrin slipped behind the monster and dropped it instantly, usually saving carcasses to cultivate the rare Ognar plant. But this time he didn't care as the rest of the pack poured out of their huts. A heavy war band emerged. 2 soldiers, 2 armored knights, an orc general, and their king. The Orc King towered over the rest, covered in thick golden fur and radiating unprecedented strength. Bellowing a war cry, the king triggered a fury aura that turned his soldier's skin glowing red. The skill surged through his troops, drastically boosting their strength and movement speed. Aldrin signaled his beast companion, Bella, holding the cub back for the right opening. As the hero drew the mob's focus, Bella ambushed from the flank and brought down the general in a single strike. The general proved no match for Bella's power, leaving Aldrin to lock on to the 2 knights. The hero activated his own buff skills, surging with sudden speed and raw power. Charging the first knight, Aldrin shattered its heavy shield and tore straight through the monster. The second knight froze in complete shock at how fast its comrade fell. Aldrin capitalized instantly, driving his blade home before the beast could react. Panic broke the remaining soldiers, and they turned to flee back toward their king. Disgusted by their cowardice, the Orc King slaughtered his own fleeing soldiers himself. Only Aldrin and the Orc King remained, face to face with a high-level mithril rank monster that sparked both dread and thrill in the hero. Refusing to dodge, Aldrin met the monster's blow head-on to test his physical limits. Iron clashed against iron, sending thunderous shockwaves ringing through the forest. The hero gradually dialed his output higher with every exchange. Pushing his strength to 37%, Aldrin blitzed past the King's Guard and ended the fight with a lethal blow. Exhausted from the clash, Aldrin smiled, satisfied with his growing power. Stepping back, the hero praised Bella for executing its ambush perfectly. Digging a massive pit to bury the mound of carcasses took far more effort than the battle itself. To preserve the Orc King's corpse for future harvesting, Aldrin instructed Bella to apply ice magic. Bella clamped its jaws onto the carcass, slowly encasing the giant body in solid ice. Together, they cleared out the old orc huts, building a crude temporary shelter for the night. At dawn, Aldrin and Bella set out into the woods to harvest stat-boosting herbs. Guided by his notebook, the hero tracked down raisin grass, a rare endurance-boosting herb that clings to rough-barked trees. Bella kept watch over the clearing while Aldrin harvested the stalks. By nightfall, the pair had secured all 5 targeted plant species. The hero planned to dry the harvest for longevity before tracking down the elusive Ognar plant. Confident in his progress, Aldrin felt ready to push deeper into uncharted woods. Returning to Rizava, the hero set out to establish a permanent base camp. Aldrin considered repurposing the abandoned orc huts, but the foul stench inside forced him to abandon that idea. Instead, he built a fresh wooden cabin from scratch to shelter himself and his loyal beast Bella. Bella stood guard constantly, keeping dangerous predators away from their new home. Over the next 4 days, Aldrin finished the cabin and stockpiled poisonous plants like raisin grass and jimpy leaves for potion brewing. With the shelter completed, his attention turned fully to locating the powerful Ognar plants. For 6 days, the hero searched every corner of the forest beside Bella, whose presence simplified the journey. The beast easily hunted wild game and intimidated local monsters away. Deep in a sunlit glade, Aldrin finally caught a trace of familiar mana. Holding Bella back for safety, the hero cautiously approached the clearing alone. There he spotted the Ognar plant, rooted directly into the corpse of a fallen monster. The carcass belongs to a brawler rabbit, a heavy-hitting beast that fought with metallic gauntlets. Sprouting from the remains was a vibrant green fruit, right for harvesting. Aldrin carefully picked the fruit and logged the exact coordinates in his notebook. He planned to return soon with the frozen Orc King's carcass to cultivate an entire crop of Ognar plants. This initial expedition into the wilderness proved an overwhelming success. A surge of pride washed over Aldrin, having proved he could survive and harvest in such hostile territory. Plenty of trials remained, from locating the legendary Fruit of Skill to mapping the vast forest. For now, he set his course back to the city of Vandeth to test his harvest and plan his next move. Though a brutal road lay ahead, the thrill of the challenge made Aldrin feel truly alive. Walking through the stone gates of Vandeth, Aldrin carried his botanical notes under his arm, with Bella at his heel. Aldrin and Bella walked down the cobbled street toward the Wandering Cat alchemy shop. Opening the door, Aldrin entered the shop with Bella and greeted Tilda, Harkin, and Melvor. Harkin and Melvor sat at the wooden counter while Tilda cleared a space on the table. Unclasping his leather pouch, Aldrin produced the ripe green ognar fruit harvested in Rosava. Aldrin set the glowing fruit down before Tilda, Harkin, and Melvor. Tilda picked up a silver scalpel, slicing the outer skin of the ognar fruit. Harkin leaned over the counter to watch Tilda separate the inner pulp from the core. Melvor adjusted his spectacles, examining the strange mana pattern pulsing inside the fruit. Tilda dipped a glass rod into the juice, observing the chemical reaction in her vial. Looking at Aldrin, Tilda explained that the fruit did not alter physical attributes like strength or stamina. Tilda pointed her scalpel at the glowing core, demonstrating how the fruit directly granted a brand new skill. Harkin stared at the severed fruit on the table as Melvor gasped. Tilda held up the glowing core, showing Harkin and Melvor the active skill rune forming inside the flesh. Aldrin watched Tilda place the core onto a brass plate. Bela rested her chin on the edge of the counter, sniffing the sweet scent of the ognar fruit. Tilda looked up at Aldrin, Harkin, and Melvor, speaking clearly about the awakening ceremony. Tilda declared that if a simple forest fruit could bestow a skill, the church held no monopoly over human destiny. Harkin nodded slowly to Melvor, contemplating the words of Tilda regarding the church. Melvor looked at Aldrin, seeing the living proof of a farmer wielding divine abilities. Tilda wiped her scalpel, setting the tool beside the sliced fruit. Aldrin picked up his botanical notebook, writing down the analysis of Tilda on the page. Bella let out a soft huff, resting her paws near the boots of Aldrin. Harkin, Melvor, and Tilda watched Aldrin close his notebook. Standing together in the quiet shop, Aldrin, Tilda, Harkin, and Melvor looked at the split fruit on the table. Tilda carefully wrapped the two halves of the ognar fruit in clean linen cloth. Aldrin reached down and placed the wrapped fruit back inside his leather pouch. Harkin stood up from the wooden stool, slinging his heavy axe onto his shoulder. Melvor adjusted his spectacles, looking back toward the open street of Vandeth. Tilda handed a small glass vial containing the extracted fruit juice to Aldrin. Aldrin slipped the vial safely into his pocket beside Nissen's botanical tome. Bella trotted toward the doorway, waiting for Aldrin to open it. Harkin and Melvor stepped out of the Wandering Cat shop, bidding Tilda a quiet farewell. Aldrin walked through the doorway into the afternoon sun, accompanied by Bella. Tilda stood at the counter of her shop, watching Aldrin, Harkin, and Melvor leave. Walking along the bustling thoroughfare of Vandeth, Aldrin looked down at Bela at his side. Harkin turned to Melvor, discussing the quiet implications of the discovery of Tilda. Melvor nodded slowly, glancing back at Aldrin as they reached the central fountain. Aldrin stopped near the stone basin, letting Bela drink from the cool water. Harkin unslung his water skin, filling it beside Bela at the fountain. Looking toward the mountain pass, Aldrin knew that the power to choose classes now lay in the forest. Melvor pulled out a map of Rosava, pointing out the uncharted western thicket to Aldrin. Aldrin took the map from Melvor, tracing the overgrown trails with his finger. Bella shook her frost-white fur, letting out a satisfied huff beside Aldrin. Harkin clapped Aldrin on the shoulder, offering to guard the road during their next trip. Aldrin folded the map and stowed it inside his pouch, alongside the ognar fruit. Melvor and Harkin turned back toward their lodgings, waving farewell to Aldrin and Bella. Aldrin walked down the stone steps toward the Gorash Inn, with Bela trotting ahead. Opening the heavy wooden door of the inn, Aldrin ushered Bela inside. Sitting down at his table, Aldrin opened his botanical journal to prepare for his next journey into Rosava. A young woman named Rue, carrying a worn leather satchel, walked through the main gate of Vandeth. Rue navigated the crowded avenue, stopping directly at the doorway of the Gorash Inn. Rue stepped through into the common room where Aldrin sat with Bela at his boots. Aldrin looked up from his table as Rue approached, unbuckling her travel pouch with a click. Rue unclasped her satchel and pulled out a leather-bound volume stamped with the crest of Nissen. Aldrin recognized the emblem immediately, pulling his own volume of the Notes of Nissen from his cloak. Rue placed the second volume of the Journals of Nissen onto the wooden table beside the Book of Aldrin. Introducing herself as the granddaughter of Nissen, Rue sat down across from Aldrin and Bella. Rue opened the yellowed parchment, pointing to notes detailing the forced disappearance of Nissen. Aldrin examined the hand-drawn diagrams while Rue explained how church officials silenced Nissen. Rue turned the page to reveal detailed sketches of the ognar tree and its skill-granting fruit. Aldrin watched Rue trace the ink margins where Nissen recorded the covert harvests of the church. Rue stated bluntly that high cardinals had suppressed the botanical discoveries of Nissen to protect their authority. Bela rested her chin on the knee of Rue, sniffing the old parchment. Rue unrolled a map of Rosava drawn by Nissen, showing the exact locations of wild ognar groves. Aldrin compared the map of Nissen with his own detailed field notes gathered in the forest. Rue produced a small brass magnifying lens, showing Aldrin the encrypted marginalia of Nissen. Aldrin read the decoded cipher aloud, confirming the church had harvested skill fruit for decades. Rue closed the Journal of Nissen, sliding the heavy volume across the table to Aldrin. Aldrin placed both volumes together, fitting the twin leather bindings neatly side by side. Rue stood up from the table, slinging her satchel over her shoulder. Aldrin handed Rue a pouch of silver coins for bringing the lost notes. Rue accepted the silver, bidding farewell to Aldrin and Bela before stepping back out. Bela watched Rue walk out into the afternoon street of Vandeth. Aldrin opened the complete manuscript of Nissen, beginning his study under the warm sunlight. Turning the brittle pages, Aldrin traced the precise anatomical drawings of the ognar tree. Bela padded across the wooden floorboards, settling her chin over the boots of Aldrin. The handwritten cipher of Nissen revealed detailed routes through the deep groves of Rosava. Aldrin pulled his brass compass onto the table. Comparing old charts with his own field notes, Aldrin marked 3 hidden groves. Harkin and Melvor opened the heavy door, walking inside to join Aldrin at the table. Melvor adjusted his spectacles, examining the combined manuscript of Nissen beside Aldrin. Harkin pulled out a chair, listening as Aldrin outlined the secret trade routes of the church. Pointing to a diagram, Aldrin showed Harkin the specific soil composition needed for skill fruit. Melvor took up a quill, copying the decoded botanical symbols onto a separate sheet. Bela raised her ears, watching Harkin set a map on the table. Aldrin unclasped his leather pouch, placing the dried ognar seeds beside the map. Harkin picked up an ognar seed, marveling at the faint mana pulse glowing in his palm. Melvor noted the matching runes between the Journal of Nissen and the seed held by Harkin. Aldrin closed the heavy manuscript, securing the leather clasp around both combined volumes. Harkin slung his heavy axe over his shoulder, agreeing to prepare provisions for the journey. Melvor gathered the copied notes, stowing them inside his satchel alongside his spectacles. Bela stood up and stretched her snowy limbs as Aldrin rose from his chair. Aldrin slipped the complete work of Nissen into his satchel. Harkin and Melvor headed toward the doorway, beckoning Aldrin and Bela to follow. Bela trotted out first, stepping into the warm afternoon light of Vandeth. Aldrin walked out onto the street, locking eyes with Harkin and Melvor beside the stone fountain. Harkin pointed toward the southern gate leading straight to the dense forest of Rosava. Melvor checked his pack straps, confirming their readiness to hunt the skill fruit. Walking side by side under the bright canopy, Aldrin, Bela, Harkin, and Melvor headed toward the city exit. A messenger bird dispatched by Mered and Feldar arrived at the Osterhall Guildhall. Orban unrolled the parchment warning, reading the decree from the Inquisitors. Aldrin and Neska stood beside the counter as Orban showed them the church seal. Outside the city gate, Cassel and Otil rode into Osterhall on black horses. Cassel dismounted near the guild steps, holding a rolled parchment with a red seal. Otil followed behind Castle, carrying a heavy ledger and ink quill. Entering the dimly lit guild hall, Cassel unrolled the scroll before Orban and the gathered masters. Cassel demanded the immediate surrender of every botanical note written by Aldrin. Orban bowed to Cassel, unable to refuse the official decree. Standing silently across the hall, Aldrin met the cold glare of Castle. Aldrin kept his hands folded over his pouch, refusing to yield his manuscripts. Otil noted the refusal in his ledger, setting a strict deadline on the parchment. Cassel pressed his heavy iron seal onto the wooden counter before turning his back on Aldrin. Outside the shop, Tilda turned her sign to closed as Aldrin approached her door. Aldrin peered through the dusty window as Tilda pointed with a trembling finger to the red wax seal. Walking down the avenue, Aldrin saw merchants covering their display stalls. Boric shook his head at Doric, refusing to buy or sell weapons under the decree. Orban posted the notice of suspension across the central guildhall board. Doric tore a canceled contract from the board, crumpling the parchment in hand. Standing silently near the wooden counter, Neska watched the guild clerk strike Doric's name from the ledger. Doric slammed his fist on the counter, but Orban turned his back on the group. Aldrin guided Doric toward the open tavern door, while Castle watched their departure from across the square. Otil crossed out another name in his ledger as merchants lined up at his desk. Sitting at a tavern table, Aldrin unrolled his notes while Neska kept watch. Doric counted his last silver coins on the wooden tabletop, glaring at the door. Doric gathered his remaining silver coins, sweeping them into his leather pouch. Aldrin reached out, but Doric pushed his chair from the table. Neska watched in silence as Doric turned toward the door of the tavern. Stepping into the street, Doric marched past Cassel and Otil without looking back. back. Aldrin and Nesca followed Doruk through the market crowd toward the armory forge. Borik looked up as Doruk unclasped his pouch on the counter. Dumping every silver coin onto the iron table, Doruk pointed at a steel longsword. Borik counted the coins, shaking his head at the insufficient payment. Doruk unbuckled his silver dagger sheath, adding the heirloom to the coin pile. Aldrin stepped into the warm forge beside Nesca, pulling out his heavy coin pouch to offer paying the remaining balance to clear Doruk's debt. Doruk slapped Aldrin's hand away, stubbornly refusing any aid from his friend. Borik accepted the dagger and coins, lifting the steel blade from the rack. Doruk took the longsword from Borik, running his thumb down the sharp steel edge. Sheathing his new longsword, Doruk secured the scabbard tightly to his leather belt. Borik swept the silver dagger heirloom and coin pile into his workbench drawer. Doruk turned on his heel, marching past Aldrin and Nesca out of the smithy. Aldrin followed Doruk out into the sunlit street, calling out his companion's name across the crowded stone square. Nesca caught Aldrin's sleeve, holding him back as Doruk strode resolutely toward the northern gate. Doruk adjusted his pack, refusing to turn around or acknowledge Aldrin and Nesca. Castle and Otto watched from the guild steps as Doruk approached the city exit. Doruk passed the armed sentries standing at the archway, stepping onto the stone trail leading to the catacombs. Standing by the forge, Aldrin watched Doruk vanish beyond the crest of the hill. Nesca placed her hand on Aldrin's shoulder as the heavy gate lowered behind Doruk. Otto noted the party split in his leather ledger with quick strokes, while Cassell turned back toward the wooden guild hall. Aldrin and Nesca stood alone in the square, watching the empty trail to the dungeon. Deep inside the stone catacombs, Doruk pressed his back against the mossy wall. Doruk gripped his new steel longsword, facing 3 stone golems in the corridor. A stone golem lunged forward, shattering the wooden shield held by Doruk. Doruk stumbled back over fallen stone, surrounded on every side by constructs. Raising his sword in desperation, Doruk braced for the fatal strike. A massive iron cleaver intercepted the blow, shattering the arm of the stone golem. Grohl stepped out from the shadows of the vault, standing over Doruk. Doruk stared in utter disbelief at the massive orc warrior standing beside him. Grohl swung his heavy cleaver, cleaving the second construct in two with brute force. A sudden burst of blue arcane light illuminated the dark corridor behind Doruk. Nesca stepped into the chamber alongside Aldrin, casting Wendell's protective barrier. A wall of force materialized, shielding Doruk, Grohl, Aldrin, and Nesca from harm. Grohl lowered his heavy blade, glaring bitterly at Aldrin and the glowing magic barrier. Grohl named the terrible price of Aldrin's methods, having watched his own people die so that a single harvest could be carried away. Doruk and Nesca listened in stunned silence as Grohl spoke his piece before turning away. Grohl marched toward the stone stairwell leading back up to the surface. Aldrin and Nesca guided Doruk up the steep incline, following Grohl toward the light. Ascending the ancient steps together, Doruk, Grohl, Nesca, and Aldrin reached the exits. Bright morning sunlight washed over all 4 figures as they emerged from the archway. Climbing out into the open daylight above ground, Doruk took a deep breath. Grohl paused on the grassy hill, turning to look back at Aldrin one last time. Aldrin offered a silent nod to Grohl, acknowledging the life the orc had spared. Grohl turned on his heel, striding away into the wilderness alone. Doruk and Nesca watched Grohl depart, before bidding a quiet farewell to Aldrin at the dusty crossroads. Parting ways outside the dungeon, Aldrin and Bella set out toward the forest of Rosava. Aldrin and Bella trekked along the dusty dirt highway leading toward the border of Rosava. Bella darted ahead through the tall grass, chasing a stray rabbit. Aldrin adjusted his heavy leather travel bag while checking his detailed hand-drawn map of the Rosava forest borders. Behind them, Doruk and Nesca walked back toward the main city gates of Vandet. Doruk sheathed his new steel blade, conversing softly with Nesca as they walked. Nesca looked back toward the high mountain, watching Aldrin and Bella disappear slowly into the distance. Aldrin stepped beneath the shadowed canopy of Rosava, breathing in the damp forest air. Bela trotted beside Aldrin, sniffing at the mossy roots of an ancient oak tree. Aldrin unclasped his canteen, taking a slow drink while scanning the dense green foliage. A distant beast roared deep within the woods, prompting Bella to prick her ears. Aldrin placed a steady hand on Bela's back, calming the frost panther cub as they advanced together through brush. Thick brambles lined the narrow trail, forcing Aldrin to draw his blade. Aldrin cleared the overgrown vines, leading Bella deeper into the uncharted forest. Bela darted ahead toward a mossy glade, sniffing the air near a towering pine tree. Aldrin followed close behind Bella, shielding his eyes from the afternoon sun. A cluster of purple raisin grass caught Aldrin's eye along the damp riverbank. Kneeling beside the stream, Aldrin carefully harvested 3 stalks of the herb. Bela growled softly at a distant rustle, keeping her ears pricked toward the thicket. Aldrin secured the plants in his leather pouch, signaling Bela to continue deeper into the thick woods. Bela trotted ahead through the dense underbrush, tracking a faint scent. Aldrin pushed aside low-hanging pine branches, following Bela into a ravine. The air turned sharply colder as Aldrin descended the ravine behind Bela. Bela slowed to a walk, her breath showing white in the chill ahead. Aldrin saw frost creeping along the roots and knew the clearing lay close ahead. Bela waited at the edge of the pines while Aldrin folded away the map of Nissen. Aldrin and Bela approached the clearing where they had left the frozen Orc King carcass. Bela sniffed the frigid air, bounding toward the thawing mound of ice and frost. Aldrin knelt beside the carcass, inspecting the thick black vine rooting in the chest. Aldrin observed a vibrant green ognar fruit hanging heavy from the stalk in the chest. Unclasping his pouch, Aldrin reached out to harvest the second ognar fruit. Bela growled softly, pointing her ears toward a twisted black stem rising beside the mound. Aldrin turned his head, spotting a second parasitic growth rooted in the dirt nearby. Aldrin stepped across the damp moss toward the strange black vines spreading from the dirt. Bela crept alongside Aldrin, her tail low as she sniffed the dark roots. Clearing away the damp, dead leaves with his boot, Aldrin uncovered a pale human hand lying still beneath the dark vine. Kneeling down, Aldrin brushed aside dirt to reveal the silver crest of Vorlan. Bela bared her fangs, growling low as dark vines pulsed through the throat of Vorlan. Aldrin stood over the corpse of Vorlan, watching thick black stalks coil around the chest. A bulbous crimson pod sprouted from the chest of Vorlan, pulsing with dark mana. Bela backed away from the corpse of Vorlan, bristling as the vines widened. Aldrin reached down, touching the icy black tendrils wrapped around Vorlan. Black sap dripped from the pod onto the armor of Vorlan, dissolving the iron plates. Bela crouched beside Aldrin, her ears pinned back in alarm. Aldrin unclasped his notebook, recording the grotesque growth sprouting from Vorlan. Dark tendrils split the crimson pod, revealing a pulsing core over Vorlan. Bela backed up 2 steps, letting out a low growl at the writhing growth. Aldrin closed his notebook, watching the parasite twist around the ribcage of Vorlan. Thicker roots sank into the dirt beneath Vorlan, drawing up black fluid from the earth. Bela kept her eyes fixed on the trembling carcass as the pod expanded further. Standing motionlessly beside Bela, Aldrin stared down at the fully formed monster on Vorlan. A pale humanoid figure fused with dark vines lifted its head from the chest of Vorlan. Bela crouched low to the ground, baring her sharp teeth at the nightmare creature. Black veins pulsed rapidly along the torso of Vorlan, feeding mana into the new monster. Aldrin unclasped his steel sword, holding the hilt firmly in his right hand. The grotesque head of the entity shifted toward Aldrin, opening 2 milky eyes. Bela let out a harsh hiss, stepping in front of Aldrin to guard her master's flank. Aldrin observed the silver insignia of Vorlan embedded in the hide. Thick tendrils coiled around the legs of Vorlan, anchoring the creature to the earth. A dark liquid oozed from the creature's mouth, dripping onto the boots of Aldrin. Bela bristled her white fur, maintaining her combat stance as the air grew freezing cold. Aldrin realized the dark experiment had transformed Vorlan completely. Jagged thorns sprouted along the monster's spine, cracking open the remaining pieces of iron armor on Vorlan. Bela circled to the left, eyeing the pulsating ognar core embedded in the neck. Aldrin raised his blade slightly, focusing his vision on the creature standing before him. The chest of Vorlan expanded slowly, releasing a cloud of black mist. Bela sniffed the toxic vapor, shaking her head as she remained beside the boots of Aldrin. Aldrin activated his sensory skill, measuring the intense mana radiating from it. Long wooden claws flexed slowly at the creature's sides, scraping against the hard stone beneath Vorlan. Bela growled softly, watching the creature's chest heave with dark life. Aldrin tightened his posture, refusing to back away from the abomination born of Vorlan. A low vibration hummed through the soil around the feet of Aldrin and his panther cub. Bela stood frozen beside Aldrin, her yellow eyes locked onto the monstrosity above. The creature grew still over the remains of Vorlan, its dark wooden limbs fully formed in the harsh daylight. Bela kept her ears pinned back, waiting for Aldrin to give the command for an attack. Standing over the transformed body of Vorlan, Aldrin held his steel weapon ready, unwilling to strike first at something still wearing a man's face. The grotesque head on Vorlan's chest turned toward Aldrin, rasping his former name. Bela growled low, her white fur bristling as the hybrid creature spoke. Aldrin gripped his sword hilt, hearing the voice of Vorlan echo through the jaw. Twisted vines flexed along the ribs, forcing the mouth over Vorlan to curse the Guildhall out loud. Aldrin stepped back, recognizing the dark fruit method he had cultivated himself. Behind a thick oak, Cassell and Otto watched the writhing abomination. Cassell narrowed his eyes, holding a holy symbol above his dark cloak. Otto stared in shock at the creature, holding his inkwell over a ledger. The monster lunged lunged at Aldrin, swinging wooden claws grown from Vorlin's spine. Aldrin sidestepped the heavy blow, parrying a thorned vine with his steel blade. Bella pounced onto the creature's flank, biting deep into the pulsating dark root mass grown over Vorlan. Black sap spattered across the grass as the hybrid shrieked with the voice of Vorlin. Aldrin struck the core on Vorlan's shoulder, realizing the thing clawing at him had grown out of his own harvest. Castle raised his hand, pointing out the dark flora over Vorlan to Otto. Otto hesitated, watching Aldrin fight the nightmare born of plant magic. The creature snapped a thorned branch at Bela, forcing the panther cub back. Aldrin channeled physical enhancement, driving his steel sword straight through the chest of Vorlan. Black blood spurted over the blade, but the entity over Vorlan continued to rise. Bella encircled the thrashing beast, her eyes locked on the pulsing Ognar root. Castle scribbled on a parchment sheet, declaring the dark growth an act of evil. Otto watched Aldrin struggle against the monster, a flicker of troubling doubt crossing his mind as he wrote it down. The hybrid entity dragged the corpse of Vorlin across the dirt toward Aldrin. Aldrin severed a thick tendril, shielding Bella as the plant monster lashed out. Cassell stepped closer through the brush, keeping his cold gaze fixed on Aldrin. Aldrin raised his dripping sword over Vorlan, preparing his next strike. The mouth over Vorlan sneered through dripping black sap, mocking Aldrin with his bitter past failure. Bella pounced onto the main root, tearing into the core as the monster howled. Aldrin plunged his steel blade straight into the pulsating Ognar heart on Vorlan. Black fluid erupted from the wound, drenching the dirt surrounding Vorlan. The jaw over Vorlan collapsed, silencing the creature's gasp. Thick, dark tendrils withered instantly in the air, turning into brittle black ash across Vorlan's armor. Aldrin pulled his blade free, staring down at the lifeless remains of Vorlan. Bela trotted to Aldrin's side, licking a streak of black sap from her foreleg. Standing over Vorlan, Aldrin wiped his steel blade clean. Cassell stepped out from the shadowed thicket, holding his iron-bound church ledger. Writing with rapid strokes, Cassell recorded every detail of the unnatural growth. Castle declared the dark flora clear evidence of heresy, pressing his red wax seal onto the page. Otto stood motionless behind Cassell, staring at the withered vines on Vorlan. Looking from the dead monster to Aldrin, Otto felt a wave of troubling doubt. Otto lowered his quill over the open ledger page, questioning whether the herbalist he had been sent to hunt was any threat to the realm at all. Castle closed his ledger with a sharp thud, locking his stern gaze onto Aldrin. Aldrin met Castle's eyes without flinching, holding his sword at his side. Bela let out a quiet growl, standing her ground between Aldrin and the churchman. Cassell raised a finger, warning Aldrin that the Holy Order would track every step. Turning away toward the road, Cassell gestured for Otto to follow close behind. Otto hesitated for a moment, looking back at Aldrin before walking away. Aldrin sheathed his sword, feeling the heavy burden of the method he had created. Bela nuzzled against Aldrin's boot, sensing the cold gloom hanging over him. The quiet forest air settled over the shadowy clearing, leaving only the dried husk of Vorlin behind. Aldrin stood alone in the glade beside Bela, staring down at the dark mark his forbidden craft had burned into the soil. Sorvin stepped into the moonlit clearing beside Vardo, his silver scabbard glinting against his royal cloak. Vardo kept a firm hand on Sorvin's shoulder, directing his movements with a quiet nod. Sorvin drew his legendary blade, leveling the tip at Aldrin's chest with effortless grace. Aldrin raised his plain steel longsword, bracing his feet against Sorvin's opening strike. Sorvin parried Aldrin's blow instantly, shattering Aldrin's guard and forcing him to his knees. Aldrin reached into his pouch instead of drawing a weapon, pulling out the glowing Ognar fruit. Vardo watched silently as Sorvin stared at the fruit held in Aldrin's trembling hand. Aldrin offered the Ognar fruit to Sorvin, speaking of the power hidden within the botanical harvest. Sorvin glanced from the fruit to the royal crest on Vardo's collar, hesitating before his brother. Sorvin knocked the Ognar fruit from Aldrin's palm, letting it roll into the dirt. Vardo pulled Sorvin back by his cloak, signaling their retreat. Sorvin turned away from Aldrin without another word, sheathing his legendary sword. Aldrin watched Sorvin and Vardo vanish into the darkness. Aldrin knelt in the damp soil, picking up the bruised Ognar fruit Sorvin had rejected. Placing the fruit carefully back inside his leather pouch, Aldrin stood up on the forest path. Bela trotted out from the shadows, brushing against Aldrin's leg with a quiet, comforting huff. Looking down the dark highway, Aldrin remembered the heavy royal crest pinned to Vardo's collar. Aldrin realized Sorvin remained bound to the kingdom's ceremony just as tightly as he was. Unslung from his shoulder, Aldrin checked the clasp on Nissen's manuscript in his satchel. Aldrin turned back toward the city gates of Vandeth, guided through the moonlight by Bella. Shadows hung over the mountain trail where Sorvin and Vardo had departed. Aldrin adjusted his cloak against the night air, walking beside Bella in silence. Bella kept her ears alert for any returning guard or monster. Aldrin knew the rift between himself and Sorvin would never be closed. Walking into the warm lantern glow of Vandeth, Aldrin and Bela headed back toward the safety of the Gorash Inn. Stepping through the heavy oak door of the Gorash Inn, Aldrin and Bela rejoined Doric and Nesca. Doric looked up from the wooden table, rising quickly to greet Aldrin. Nesca offered a bowl of warm broth to Bela as the Frost Panther rested on the floor. Unclasping his leather pouch, Aldrin displayed the bruised Ognar fruit that Sorvin had knocked into the dirt. Doric listened in quiet shock as Aldrin described the sudden encounter on the road. Aldrin explained how Vardo kept a controlling grip on Sorvin throughout the confrontation. Nesca realized Sorvin had refused the fruit because taking it would expose the ceremony's lies. Bella rested her chin on Aldrin's boots while the companions discussed their next move. Unrolling Nissen's manuscript on the table, Aldrin pointed out botanical notes to Doric and Nesca. Doric rested his hand on the hilt of Boric's masterwork sword, pledging support to Aldrin. Nesca held her glowing magic staff, ready to use the spells learned from Wendell. Bela let out a soft rumble, watching the flickering hearth fire. Aldrin knew Sorvin and Vardo would report their meeting to the kingdom's authorities. Doric and Nesca agreed to leave Vandeth before morning light broke over the peak. Outside the inn window, guards patrolled the cobblestone streets under a waning moon. Aldrin packed Nissen's manuscript securely back inside his travel satchel. Bela rose from the floorboards, shaking sleep out of her pale winter coat. Doric tightened his leather armor belts and readied his pack. Nesca extinguished her magic staff flame as Aldrin stood up from the bench. Aldrin took one last look around the room, ready to face his brother again. Quiet shadows stretched across the tavern floor as Aldrin and Bella moved to the door. Doric picked up his heavy traveling cloak. Nesca adjusted her satchel strap quietly. Aldrin opened the wooden inn door. Looking out at the misty morning road, Aldrin, Doric, and Nesca stepped out with Bella. Reaching the square of Osterhall, Aldrin and Bella stopped in front of Merritt at the counter. Merritt took the glowing purple Ognar fruit offered from Aldrin's open palm with both hands. Aldrin watched Merritt bite into the skin, choosing her own future strength before the townspeople. Merritt stood taller as a faint aura stirred around her shoulders, smiling back at Aldrin. Walking over to the meat market, Aldrin and Bella approached the local butcher standing by his stall. Aldrin handed a second Ognar fruit directly to the butcher, who accepted it without hesitation. Aldrin and Bella watched as the butcher swallowed the fruit whole, wiping his mouth in astonishment. Outside the village fence, Aldrin and Bella met an elderly farmer leaning on a wooden rake. Aldrin pressed a third Ognar fruit into the old farmer's calloused palms, watching him consume the harvest. Aldrin smiled as the farmer straightened his bent back, marveling at the sudden strength in his joints. Grohl emerged from the forest edge, taking the fourth Ognar fruit held out by Aldrin with a grunt. Grohl bit into the ripe fruit, nodding in silent respect to Aldrin. Cassell marched onto the central square beside Odell, holding up his inquisitorial warrant. Townsfolk surrounded Cassell and Aldrin on every side, displaying their newly awakened abilities. Cassell lowered his hands in shock, unable to arrest an entire town that had chosen its own class. Celine charged down the cobblestone road with her magic staff raised to destroy Aldrin. Celine skidded to a halt as Aldrin held out the final Ognar fruit toward her trembling chest. Aldrin offered the Ognar fruit to Celine, offering her a true choice instead of vengeance. Celine lowered her staff, taking the fruit from Aldrin in silence. Cassell turned back toward his horse, ordering Otto to ride with him to the capital. Otto stepped back from Castle, unbuckling his inquisitorial badge. Castle glared at Otto before mounting his horse alone and galloping into the distance. Otto walked over to join Aldrin and Meret, choosing to remain behind in Osterhall. Bella trotted over to Otto, nudging his knee with her snout. Standing together in the sunlit square, Aldrin, Meret, Grohl, Celine, and Otto looked toward the peaceful town. Merritt walked over to the wooden counter, serving fresh spring water to Aldrin and Otto. Grohl rested his iron axe against the stone wall, watching Aldrin with a quiet nod. Celine opened Nissen's manuscript on the table, examining the botanical diagrams alongside Aldrin. Otto sat beside Merritt, taking off his heavy traveler's cloak with a sigh of relief. Aldrin tipped the last of the Ognar seeds from his pouch onto the table for Bella. Townsfolk gathered around the square, talking peacefully with Merritt, Grohl, and Celine about their future. Grohl hoisted a heavy wooden beam onto his shoulder, offering to repair the town gate for Aldrin. Celine sat beside Merritt, discussing spellcasting in quiet tones. Otto took up a quill, beginning a new journal of his time in Osterhall with Aldrin. Bella curled up at Aldrin's feet in the warm sunlight. Aldrin looked out at the open road, knowing the capital had lost its grip on Osterhall. Looking at each other, Aldrin, Maret, Groll, Celine, and Otto smiled together. Sunlight washed over the bustling marketplace as Aldrin, Bella, Maret, Groll, Celine, and Otto stood as one. Aldrin unclasped his travel pack, placing Nissen's manuscript back into his leather pouch. Maret turned to the counter to organize the apothecary jars for the gathering crowd. Groll hoisted his iron axe onto his shoulder and walked toward the town gate with Odal. Celine unslung her magic staff, sitting beside Maret to discuss new spell formulas. Bella lay down on the sun-warmed cobblestones at Aldrin's feet. Looking toward the open highway, Aldrin, Maret, Groll, Celine, and Otto watched the peaceful horizon. Aldrin turned back toward the marketplace counter, leaving Nissen's notebook open beside Maret. Otto dipped his quill into dark ink to log the peaceful turn of events in Osterhall. Walking side by side across the cobblestones, Aldrin and Bella headed back toward their house. Aldrin reached the wooden porch of the cottage, opening the door for Bella to enter first. Bella trotted inside and settled onto her woven rug near the warm hearth. Aldrin closed the heavy latch behind them, stepping into the quiet sanctuary of his home. Aldrin dipped his quill in black ink, drawing the final boundary line of Rosaba. Spreading the finished parchment, Aldrin let the black ink dry. Resting her massive horned head near the hearth, the fully grown Bella let out a sigh. Aldrin stroked the thick white fur of Bella as she stretched across the floor. Opening the heavy wooden front door, Tilda walked into the spacious manor hallway. Tilda set a newly painted sign on the table, displaying the symbol of Herbalist's Guild. Aldrin and Tilda hung the carved wooden emblem above the entrance. Doric stepped into the courtyard, displaying his new mithril rank badge. Nesca walked beside Doric, adjusting her high-rank archmage silk cloak. Unsheathing his polished steel longsword, Doric demonstrated a sharp high strike. Nesca levitated 3 glowing mana spheres above her palm to show her progress. Sitting on the porch step, Aldrin watched Doric and Nesca practice in the yard. Bella trotted over to Doric and Nesca, resting her massive paws on the grass. A messenger hawk landed on the stone balustrade, bearing a sealed parchment. Tilda unclasped the wax-sealed parchment letter from the hawk's leg strap. Handing the letter to Aldrin, Tilda pointed at the wax seal. Aldrin broke the royal wax seal, unrolling the letter written by his brother Sorvin. Doric and Nesca paused their sparring, walking over to stand beside Aldrin. Bela rested her chin on Aldrin's knee, watching him read. Reading the quiet letter, Aldrin saw no threats or royal summons from Sorvin. Sorvin acknowledged Aldrin's strength in his message, offering a quiet truce. Aldrin folded the parchment carefully, tucking the letter into his cloak. Tilda opened the guild doors, welcoming the first young herbalist apprentices. Doric helped the young recruits carry heavy crates of dried herbs into the hall. Nesca demonstrated basic mana control to the new apprentices gathering inside. Tilda organized rows of glass vials on the shelves, while apprentices took notes. Standing at the mortar table, Aldrin demonstrated crushing dried raisin roots. Young recruits observed closely as Aldrin showed the correct grinding motion. Bella lay near the threshold, watching the bustling apprentices with calm eyes. Doric carried a bundle of wooden drying racks into the back garden area. Setting down the racks, Doric assisted Tilda with green leaves. Nesca guided a young girl through filtering a blue potion into a glass beaker. Tilda polished the wooden guild sign hanging above the doorway. Aldrin walked to the courtyard table, unrolling a blank sheet of parchment. Dipping his quill, Aldrin began sketching the outline of a neighboring region. Bella trotted over to Aldrin, resting her chin on the wooden table edge. Tilda brought a cup of hot tea to Aldrin, glancing at his new geographical sketches. Doric and Nesca joined Aldrin at the table, looking over the newly drawn routes. Aldrin pointed to a shaded valley marked beyond the border of Rosava. Nesca traced the mountain path with her finger, comparing it to her spellbook map. Doric leaned over the parchment, tapping a finger on a marked monster nest. Bella nudged Aldrin's arm, letting out a soft rumble as he turned the page. Tilda set a fresh stack of blank leather notebooks beside Aldrin's elbow. Aldrin opened a weathered ledger, preparing his quill for the next region. Aldrin wrote down the name of the next forest at the top of a fresh parchment page. Tilda, Doric, and Nesca watched from the porch as Aldrin packed his leather travel kit. Bella rested her massive chin across Aldrin's lap, eyeing the distant tree line beyond. Aldrin glanced toward the dark canopy of the new forest stretching past the horizon. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves as Aldrin turned the page. Sitting on the stone steps, Aldrin looked out at the next forest with his notes open on his knee.